Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the November 10th meeting of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Novick.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Hales.
Here. Welcome, everyone. We'll get the procedural stuff out of the way here in a moment, and I'll ask our council clerk to read the item. And then, well, why don't you go ahead and do that, because we have a single item on the calendar this afternoon, and I'll talk about the rest.
Item 1259, restrict bulk fossil fuel terminals.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here today. We are citizens of a good place, and it is so good to see you all. So thank you for being part of the legitimate exercise of democracy, and may that always be true in our city and elsewhere. So thank you for coming. Some of you have probably testified at City Council before. I'll go through the procedures quickly so we can hear from you. We are going to have a staff presentation and some invited testimony about this item, and then we'll open it up to public testimony. I know there was a sign-up sheet outside, and hopefully you've signed up. Because of the number of people here, we're going to ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes apiece, because we want to hear from as many people as possible. If you have already had your views expressed, you can feel free to say so or yield time to another. We have only a couple of ground rules here in terms of testimony. You need give only your name. You don't have to give us your address when you come up and speak. And if you agree with someone's point of view, feel free to give them a thumbs up or a wave of the hand or twirl something if you have it in your hand. And if you disagree with someone, a polite hand gesture to the negative is okay. But we ask always in this chamber that we not make demonstrations, applause, and verbal displays in favor or against our fellow citizens' points of view so that everyone can be heard. We make exceptions for visiting dignitaries and students, and so we might make that exception today because we have some student testimony, and I'm going to exercise the prerogative of having them up early in the process. I know this isn't a school day, but there's still homework. So that's, I think, it in terms of procedures. We have some amendments that we'll consider, but let me open up with some remarks and then set this in motion. The rapid development of fossil fuel resources in the western part of our country and in Canada has put a lot of pressure on Portland and other cities, and has sought to transport and move huge quantities of fossil fuels through and into our communities. As we all experienced with the Pembina proposal last year, the zoning code actually allows fossil fuel terminals as a warehouse and freight movement use in our zoning code today, without any limit on the size of these terminals. We, of course, passed a resolution saying we're going in a different direction, and today is the proposal to put that into city law, into our code. The amendments in front of us, as we'll have explained in greater detail by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability staff, will prohibit all types of new fossil fuel terminals and impose limits on the expansion of existing ones. Through our climate action plan and council resolutions, this council has been on record for a long time to advance policies to reduce fossil fuel use and to oppose oil and coal trains traveling through our city. Last year, we took the step of passing that resolution that I mentioned that stated that we would oppose the expansion of infrastructure whose primary purpose is transporting or storing fossil fuels. We, of course, are also putting a lot of time and effort into becoming disaster resistant, or at least more so, to be more resilient as a city. And many of our employment and industrial zones, including the critical energy and transportation infrastructure in Portland, are located in areas with moderate to high risk of liquefaction. So that's a public safety issue that we need to address as a city. Last month, we adopted a natural hazard mitigation action plan that includes a critical infrastructure hub study that outlines the next steps in improving seismic safety for these fossil fuel terminals in the northwest industrial areas along Highway 30 and in Linton. These amendments before us will prohibit all types of new fossil fuel terminals of 2 million gallons or larger, and impose limits on the expansion of existing ones to no more than 10% of their current storage capacity. The limited expansion is allowed only in conjunction with the replacement of old tanks, so there is an improvement in that seismic safety if anybody actually is in the process of replacing a tank, something that, by the way, is not happening very often now, and in terms of that seismic resiliency needs to happen more quickly in order to avoid disaster. So before we hear from our staff, I want to introduce some amendments that clarify up actions. Amendment number 1 is a technical correction to exception number 4 to clarify that truck-only terminals, the kind of local terminals that we have, are not bulk fossil fuel terminals. Amendment number 2, it makes some changes to exception number 7 to clarify that fuel storage for airports, marine servicing facilities, and rail yards are not bulk fossil fuel terminals. These are basically the filling stations for the airport, the rail yards, and the ships. They exist here today. And the number 3, amendment number 3, clarifies the definition of fossil fuels that by specifying that non-fuel petroleum-based products such as asphalt are not fossil fuels. Actually, what you think about it with asphalt, what happens with asphalt is we take oil and we mix it with gravel and we put it on the street and it stays there for 100 years. So it's not going into the atmosphere. So it's a very different use of petroleum than burning it and releasing hydrocarbons and carbon dioxide. And number 4, as I mentioned, provides additional direction for follow-up actions. So I'm going to propose those amendments and see if there's a second. Thank you. And again, those are before us, and you can testify on those as we proceed. So now I want to call on our Bureau staff, Susan Anderson, the Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Michael Armstrong, and Tom Armstrong, to come up and explain in greater detail what's in front of us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So as the mayor mentioned, I'm Susan Anderson. I'm the director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and with me are Michael Armstrong and Tom Armstrong, and no, they're not related, though they are sometimes interchangeable.
Irreplaceable, but interchangeable.
I just want to start off with a little bit of context for the discussion, and then I'll hand it over to Michael and Tom. You know, cities all over the world are talking about climate change, and some are making big, broad statements, and they're setting up their action plans. But here in Portland, we're doing more, and we're doing much more, and we've been doing it for a long, long time. And we're showing the rest of the world that cities can make a difference. Along with a dozen or so other cities internationally, Portland is seen as a leader on this issue. We've cut carbon emissions by 40% per capita since 1990, and we've cut total emissions by 21%, even while our population increased by more than a third and jobs increased by more than 25%. So we're headed in the right direction. You know, sometimes the actions that cities take are broad and sweeping, like land use regulations that impact housing and transportation and environmental issues and other issues. And sometimes there's actions that we take are very specific and they're very measurable. They're measurable like actions you've taken in the past, things like Clean Energy Works, which resulted in energy and money savings for more than 5,000 homes. Or measurable like cutting city government energy bills, which we've done by $6 million just for last year alone, saving more than $50 million in the past 10 years. We've invested in electric vehicles. We're now buying 100% green power for all city facilities, something that we've been heading towards and are now at for several years. We're requiring energy scores for large commercial buildings, which you did and enacted here 18 months ago, so that future tenants can compare the energy prices in different spaces and owners can see what's possible and what their competitors are doing so that they can make smart investments. And in just a couple of weeks, we're going to ask you to do the same for houses. We're going to have a residential energy score so that home buyers will have the benefit of energy scores when they're looking to buy a house, much like we have miles per gallon ratings for cars. So we know that specific measurable actions are essential if we're going to reduce the use of fossil fuels. So why am I talking about energy efficiency when what we're going to talk about today is about fossil fuel storage? Well, reducing our demand is essential if we want to meet our climate goals, but it's also essential if we want to limit the size of fossil fuel infrastructure in the future, because demand needs to stay stable or go down if storage facilities are going to be limited. But we know we can do this, and we've shown we can do this over the past 20 years. It started back on City Council 2 decades ago. Mike Lindbergh, Earl Blumenauer were sitting, I think it used to be over there on the other side of the building, but you've been doing the right thing for a long time. I think Mayor Hales, you are all a part of that. With our past record as our proof, we know that we can show the rest of the world that this can be done. So I encourage you all to keep pushing us in the right direction. We have several more projects and policies that will be coming to you quite soon. We have the residential energy score. We have a new electric vehicle strategy that will be coming out, and community solar hopefully by next summer. So all these things are going to make a difference. And sadly, given the election, now more than ever, we need local action. We can't rely on the federal government. We can't rely on a future president who doesn't even believe that climate change is real. But we know the science is clear, and clean energy costs are falling dramatically since 2008. Wind costs are down 40%, photovoltaic costs are down 60%, LED lighting costs are down 90%. So these cost reductions don't just mean it's a smart move from the environment, it's a smart investment. So I look forward to hearing all the testimony this afternoon, and I really, really encourage you to move this ordinance forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, gentlemen.
All right, Mayor and Commissioners, I'm Michael Armstrong with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So the ordinance in front of you this afternoon results from several policies that Council has adopted over the last months, going back to the resolution you adopted almost exactly a year ago, this fossil fuel infrastructure resolution, which had two important pieces. One, to actively oppose expansion of infrastructure, whose primary purpose is to transport or store fossil fuels, and at the same time, ensure that those restrictions don't get in the way of improvements to safety, efficiency, seismic resilience, the routine operations, or to get in the way of service to end users. Later, you adopted a policy in the comprehensive plan that's generally around fossil fuel distribution to limit that distribution to the facilities necessary to serve the regional market. Those policies are based on considerations of a couple different concerns, significantly public safety and environmental risks, both from fossil fuels being transported to Portland, often by rail, sometimes by barge, by pipeline, and also from where those fuels are stored. This map shows the soils that are susceptible to liquefaction, with the darker colors being more susceptible. The large fossil fuel tanks that this ordinance addresses are located primarily along the river in what, for the most part, is moderate to high risk of soil liquefaction. So we're trying to address public safety and environmental risks. We're also trying to respond, as Susan described, to the mounting urgency of climate change. A lot of the work we have to do here locally to reduce emissions is around improving efficiency, installing renewables. At the same time, the globe is transitioning toward cleaner fuels, lower carbon, and overall reductions of emissions. To keep that going in the right direction, we need to keep fossil fuels in the ground. And as Mayor, you pointed out, there are a lot of fossil fuels that are currently coming out of the ground across the western U.S. For us to succeed on climate, we can't let those be exported and burned. At the same time, we recognize that the transition away from fossil fuels will take some time. Portland has a key role geographically as the distribution hub. It supplies about 90%, over 90% of the fossil fuels that serve the state, bits of Southwest Washington as well. And so we know that we need to accommodate the existing infrastructure, and we want to encourage it to move toward safer facilities. Portland's been adding population and jobs, as Susan referred, and at the same time, our fossil fuel use has stayed essentially flat or falling. This slide shows gasoline and diesel use in Oregon over the last 10 years, and the trend is flat, slightly down. The next slide shows natural gas use. This is primarily supplied by pipeline. The trend is a little less, it's a little more uneven, in part due to different winters. There are higher peaks in there as well, and yet the overall trend is flat or falling despite population growth, despite job growth. Now, it's important to keep in mind that even this kind of low to no growth scenario, we may need some tanks in order to help the transition to cleaner fuels. When we bring in biodiesel, when we bring in some of the other low carbon fuels, we do need to be able to store those, to blend those, and the ordinance attempts to address that. So we think we've anticipated those needs. At a more global level, we are seeing big changes in global demand for fossil fuels. And so this chart showing, the earlier 2003 global energy forecast, kind of steady increase. That forecast has been moderated very substantially. So the 2015 forecast is close to flat. Not a lot is clear about the future right now. I think it's pretty clear that other countries will accelerate their work to reduce carbon emissions. And so I think we can expect to see more of this in the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom to describe the amendments in detail.
Okay, Tom Armstrong with BPS. I think the mayor in his opening remarks did a good job of providing an overview of what the zoning code amendments do to implement the policy directions in the resolution that you passed last year. Essentially, what we're doing is defining a new type of use, a new category of use called bulk fossil fuel terminals, and we're characterizing that use. We are essentially prohibiting that use in all of the base zones, which primarily applies to the industrial zones. And then we're coming up with some standards to say, once we prohibited that use, what do we do with the existing terminals? And the PSC recommendation before you is to make them limited uses that allow them to continue to operate, allow them to make investments in seismic improvements, and limit the expansion of their storage capacity to no more than 10% of what they have today. A couple of key things here, how we define fossil fuels and what's a fuel versus another petroleum product was one of the challenges we had through this process, especially also when we look at things like natural gas and biogas and how you tell the difference between the two and what that source comes from. And so we've settled on a definition that refers to decayed plants and animals that lived millions of years ago and are used as a source of energy. And as the mayor has said and proposed in his amendments, we have some exclusions in that definition to make it clear that non-fuels and other renewable fuels, such as ethanol or renewable diesel, are not included in that definition, and so that we provide sort of the opportunity for that transition to the cleaner fuels. As I said, we've just defined what a bulk fossil fuel terminal is, and it is what we call a gateway facility. It has access to a marine dock or a railroad spur or a pipeline, and it has a significant amount of storage capacity. The recommendation before you from the Planning and Sustainability Commission lowered that threshold capacity from 5 million gallons to 2 million gallons, roughly equivalent to the amount of oil that can be stored in one unit train. They thought that was a good benchmark in terms of what represents a large facility that has a sort of wider impact. Based on your resolution last year, we again have a number of exclusions or clarifications of who's not included, who doesn't get captured within this definition. And as the mayor said, we had some technical amendments to make clear, especially with respect to airports and marine and rail servicing facilities that are essentially the gas stations for those larger type uses, are not included in this definition of what a bulk terminal is. As I said, we have 10 of these petroleum-based terminals out in the Northwest Industrial District, and then one Northwest Natural LNG facility. And so a key thing was what to do with them, and the Planning and Sustainability Commission really sort of considered a range of options, whether to make them a non-conforming use or a conditional use. In the end, they settled on a recommendation to make them what we call limited use, to limit their expansion of their storage capacity to 10%, and that in order to unlock that 10%, it has to be a replacement. It's just not new storage capacity. You got to replace an old tank, and that's where we get a little bit of a seismic upgrade benefit, because the new tanks have to comply with the current seismic codes. At the same time, they recommended that for those type of tank replacements, that there should not be a land use review that introduces some uncertainty in the process and potential delays through appeals, that they wanted to provide a clear path to have those seismic replacements happen. In exchange for that, they required a public notice and meeting prior to the filing of a development permit for these tanks. This is similar to what we do with multifamily residential buildings, in that when a developer comes forward, he needs to notify the surrounding neighborhood, he needs to have a meeting to explain the proposal, and then the neighborhood is at least aware of what's going on, they can make their views known, but it does create some public awareness of what types of activities will be happening out on these existing terminals. Again, just a little graphic of how that replacement and storage capacity work. If you have, say, a facility with 50 million gallons of current capacity, they can decide which combination of tanks they want to replace. They can replace it one for one. They could replace it with a larger one. But the idea is we're removing these older tanks that aren't up to current codes and replacing them with new tanks that are. I think you'll hear also from our Bureau partners at PBEM and Fire about the seismic safety concerns and the slow pace of turnover in terms of the existing tanks that are out there. These zoning codes really address sort of that future growth and expansion. It doesn't really get at the issue of how to improve the safety of what's out there today, absent, sort of flat or declining demand. Is there really going to be a need to expand capacity? And that's going to require additional steps beyond what we address in these zoning code changes today. Just to reiterate what the mayor's put on the table in terms of the 4 amendments. There are 3 amendments to the zoning code to really clarify our intent as to what is a bulk or not a bulk fossil fuel terminal and what is not a fossil fuel in terms of those other products like asphalts and lubricants. And then an amendment to the ordinance to provide some additional direction to us and to our Bureau partners to both report back to you on the effect of what these regulations has, especially as it relates to the issue of sort of the fuel supply for the region and the state in terms of how that fits with our growing economy and population, but also continued direction to the city bureaus to work on this issue with the state of Oregon with respect to the seismic upgrades of the existing tanks. And with that, that is the end of my remarks. If there's any questions.
Questions at this point?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, so a 10% expansion of a terminal
Yes.
just counts the storage space itself, not any associated piping or pumping that goes with it?
Correct. I mean, the piping is the transloading and the movement of product, but between the source and the individual tanks and to however it's being conveyed out of the facility. And so storage, that's movement. Storage is the tanks themselves.
Okay, thank you.
So we're putting that 10% in to try to encourage the companies to change their tanks. So am I correct in thinking we're not allowed to say just do it?
Currently, under state law, the seismic upgrades are a building code issue, and it's similar to what we're struggling with the unreinforced masonry buildings. And so, absent a program similar to that URM program that inventories all the tanks that are out there and comes up with some sort of deadline, you have 10 years, 15 years to replace these. This is an incentive and a hedge. It's an incentive to provide some cost recovery to those seismic upgrade improvements. It's also a hedge against that demand curve that Michael showed in terms of, some uncertainty about how much additional storage capacity these facilities might need to comply with the state's clean fuel standards. because those are going to come on board over the next 10 years. They need additional capacity for fuel additives like ethanol. They need additional blending to comply with those standards. The ethanol tanks themselves aren't subject to these regulations, but the blended fuel capacity would be. And so this is a way of providing them a little bit of flexibility to also comply with those clean fuel regulations.
And do we know what the life expectancy of a tank is?
A very long time. There are tanks out there that are more than 50 years old. So
I'm just thinking of, the Water Bureau. Once in a while, we have to replace those tanks. So do we think that, do we know how many tanks are going to reach the end of their useful life anyway?
not with any precision, but we do know that there's over 300 tanks out there, and we've seen somewhere on the order of 15 to 20 tank replacements or new tanks come in over the last 10 to 15 years. So it's been a very slow replacement period. Perhaps Nate Takara, the fire marshal, when he gets up, he's more familiar with what's out there today and those risks involved, that he may be able to speak to that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. These folks will be standing by for more questions that we haven't, but let's go ahead and complete our staff presentation by asking Nate Takara, our fire marshal, and Jonathan Paith to move from our Bureau of Emergency Management to come up and tell us their perspective, please. I'll embarrass her on the way up to say that Jonna, by the way, is doing double duty and is also our Northwest 23rd Avenue Recovery Manager, and she's doing a great job in helping the community get back on its feet. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hills. My name is Jonna Popeth-Themiu, and as you said, I work for the city's Bureau of Emergency Management. And in there at the Bureau, I am the lead on the city's natural hazard mitigation plan. So we talked about that plan at council last month, and as you mentioned in your introduction, natural hazards, including flooding, drought, heat waves, and severe storms are all intensified by global warming. So as emergency manager, I see very clearly how important it is for the city to do its part to reduce climate impacts, and I think this proposal is very worthwhile for that reason alone. In terms of local vulnerabilities, the critical energy infrastructure hub, the tank farms in Linton, is an area of significant risk for the entire state of Oregon. The particular issue of earthquake risk in Linton has long been an area of focus for our Bureau, and as part of the update to that natural hazard plan, which Council adopted, PBEM commissioned a focused study on the Linton area. And what our consultants found was that the majority of the facilities in the CEI hub are constructed to no or low seismic standards. And they're mostly located on soft, liquefiable soils that are typically associated with increased seismic vulnerability. So the code changes that are proposed today limit the expansion of these facilities, and that is another reason to support it. I think Nate will say more. I think there is definitely more work to be done in this regard with respect to the building code and getting at the retrofits of existing facilities. But one more thing, as you already alluded to, PBEM's a small bureau. I do wear many hats. So in addition to being the lead on the natural hazard mitigation plan, I am the recovery manager for the Northwest 23 gas explosion. That explosion was incredibly dangerous and destructive. It also involved a very tiny amount of fuel compared to what is stored in even one small industrial storage tank. And I think this incident reminds us that even with a fuel like natural gas, which is generally very safe and a technology that's very well understood, nothing is foolproof. So preventing new large terminals inside the city limits is the only approach that is 100% certain to protect residents of Oregon's largest city from a major industrial accident. So this is the third reason that the Bureau of Emergency Management supports these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Nate, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to testify this afternoon. I would like to thank Director Anderson and her team for the work they put forward to get the fossil fuel zoning amendments brought to council this afternoon. I like the fact that we were talking about this important subject regarding the bulk terminal fuel farms, and I support the concept of finding ways to limit the growth of these facilities. However, I do have some concerns with the proposal because it primarily focuses on limiting the growth of these facilities. Unless there are additional steps that are being considered to complement this amendment, the proposal alone will not make these facilities safer today. In recent years, when these facilities construct new larger tanks, they were mandated to install these tanks to current structural fire and life safety standards. This includes the most critical liquefaction requirements. Although these tanks are generally larger than the ones being replaced, there are cumulative benefits with new tanks when new tanks are installed. These tanks are installed to current code requirements, and from a fire life safety perspective, these tanks are considered to be much safer than the ones being replaced. Just as important, during the installation of these tanks, several key fire and life safety components are evaluated, such as containment, spill control, and fire safety equipment, to ensure that they meet current code. Overall, this has a positive impact on the overall safety of these facilities. Moving forward, I believe in order to make these facilities safer, if council decides to limit the size of these facilities, then I strongly encourage council to consider creating initiatives or initiating the development of new code requirements for mandatory structural, fire and life safety upgrades for existing tanks to meet current code requirements.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's exactly what we want to make sure we report back, because there's more work to be done besides
Exactly.
the policy and the zoning code itself. So, thank you. Questions? Thank you both very much. So now we have a couple of panels to call. First involves policymakers that are affected by this. Thanks to our tribal liaison, Pat Gibson, we have made sure that we always are in good communication with tribal governments, and we have Kathleen George, who's the tribal councilwoman from the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde here. We also have Mayor Arlene Burns, who's the mayor of Mosier. I think we're going to have Peter Cornelison, who's a Hood River City Council member. Yes, he is here. And Representative Lou Frederick from here in Portland, in the district that contains all that liquefiable soil you just saw. So, Senator-elect. Thank you, Lou Frederick. So, welcome, good afternoon, so good to have you all here.
Thank you very much.
Start, Kathleen, or?
Sure, thank you very much. Hayou Masih, Mayor Hales, and all of our commissioners, thank you so much for inviting the Grand Ronde Tribe to speak to this important issue before you today. Our relationship with the City of Portland is of critical importance to us and of great value, and we always appreciate your including us when decisions are made that affect our precious Willamette River, upon which Portland depends and many, many Oregonians depend. The Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, of course, maintain their relationship with their ceded lands and with this river, and we return to it every year to fish and to celebrate our fisheries, which travel right through downtown Portland, up the Willamette River to the Grand Ronde Reservation. Our salmon and our skockwal, our eels, pass through and reside in the Willamette and are affected by it. And of course, the lives of our tribal members and all Portlanders are affected by the river and the pollutants that go into it. And of course, the decision before you today does not occur in a vacuum and is not only considered in light of this particular fossil fuel terminal zoning decision. We know, of course, that our Willamette River is a Superfund site. And right now, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Environmental Quality, and many organizations are considering how we can heal this deeply, deeply wounded river. And so it is in this context that a consideration of expanded opportunities for pollution or safety concerns that could cause future pollution are of the utmost importance. The Grand Ronde Tribe remains deeply committed to healing our fisheries that reside and depend upon this river and all the people who depend on the river. Tribal people and other people who rely on fish to feed their families are at higher risks whenever pollutants are in our river and in our fish. And just as Portland Harbor has the potential and is affecting our fish and our people, pollution from safety threats at fossil fuel terminal zoning issues and facilities have the potential to affect that as well. Not only do we have the recent tragedy in Portland of the explosion, but we also remember the recent Mosier train derailment of the last year, where our rivers were polluted. This year, yeah, I'm sure you will help us remember that in great detail. And we need to remember that the very best laid plans can go awry. While we certainly appreciate the opportunity for increased safety measures and the replacement of old tanks, we do need to share that our concerns are that continued fossil fuel terminal development or any opportunities for expansion would introduce additional risk of harm to an already damaged and degraded ecosystem. And that any continued fossil fuel terminal development would be unacceptable to Grand Ronde because we feel that right now, as a community of Oregonians, our focus needs to be on improving our safety, healing our river, our fisheries to protect our people. And the potential benefit of fossil fuel development, in our opinion, has not been shown to be worth the cost to Oregon's priceless natural and cultural resources. So I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Mayor Burns, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation and for all the hard work you are doing. I'm Arlene Burns, and I'm the mayor of Mosier. In this crucial time, more than ever, we need to proactively address the threats imposed by fossil fuel infrastructure expansion and development that will negatively affect not only the city of Portland, but all communities along the tracks. As everyone knows, on June 3rd, the city of Mosier experienced the derailment of a 96-car unit train of Bakken crude, which was on its way to an existing terminal in Tacoma. This train was going less than 30 miles an hour on a relatively straight piece of track. Only because it was a rare windless day, we did not lose our town. Now we are experiencing 4 or 5 of these unit trains per month, but if the Vancouver facility is built or expansion of existing facilities in Portland is allowed, this could increase to 4 or 5 unit trains a day or more. We are fighting for our lives out in the Columbia River Gorge as infrastructure development is being pushed even in front of Mosier where the train derailed to facilitate the proposed terminals, even despite the fact that ours is a national scenic area supposedly protected and protecting tribal rights. We need your help. After yesterday's national election, one thing is clear. It's up to us to be the innovators and the leaders in progressive city codes and resolutions to not only protect our future, but to be a template for the rest of the country. Especially in the light of seismic risk, we need to focus our efforts on industry development that will not increase the hazards during a seismic event. I'm thankful and probably never prouder to be an Oregonian and serve as an elected official because I believe that the future is in the hand of committed individuals who collectively can lead the way to a sustainable future. Mayor Hales and this entire council have shown leadership by passing a landmark fossil fuel resolution. By adopting binding rules that take bold action, you will also be helping all of the towns along the tracks daunted by the possibility of the Columbia River Gorge becoming a superhighway for fossil fuel transportation. I urge this council to take the strongest stand possible, not only to protect our future, but to lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Councilmember Cornelison, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Hales and Commissioners. My name is Peter Cornelison, and I'm a council member from Hood River, Oregon. And both the city of Hood River and the county of Hood River have passed resolutions unanimously opposing oil by rail through the Columbia Gorge. We're joined by at least 6 other communities or agencies in the gorge who have adopted similar resolutions. The oil train fire and spill that happened in Mosier this summer was only 7 miles away from our city of 7,000 people. Our entire downtown is within the half-mile blast zone of an oil train explosion. So we're quite at risk. In the gorge, we live under the daily threat of another oil train explosion. Oil trains travel on both sides of the river, Oregon and Washington, and a fire or a spill would impact the entire gorge. For instance, this summer when the derailment happened in Mosier, I-84 was completely shut down, as well as Washington Highway 14. And most local fire departments were responding to the emergency in Mosier. They weren't available for any local emergencies. We see your fossil fuel resolution as the best way for our communities to be protected. We know we can't stop rail traffic, but if the terminal capacity is not there, then they won't be coming through the gorge. We salute your leadership on this issue and the work you've done on a climate action plan. We in Hood River look at that as an example as we try and craft our own. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frederick, welcome. Senator-elect Frederick, I got to get used to that new title. I bet you like the sound of it. Thank you for being here. Push the button on the base of that microphone there. There we go.
There we are. All right. Thank you very much, Mayor Hales and member of the City Council. I am Lou Frederick, State Representative from District 43, North and Northeast Portland, and Senator-elect from a much larger area that has the same description. My Senate district includes import and export facilities that serve the entire state. In fact, just about any goods coming to or leaving Oregon have to pass through the facilities in my district. That's on the airport, that's the railroads, that's the Columbia River, the Willamette River. It's all of the Port of Portland east of the Willamette River, basically. It's a pretty large-scale area. Looking forward to it. Now, that represents substantial opportunities for those who live nearby, but also substantial risks when we talk about the movement of fossil fuels. While a major incident at a fossil fuel export facility would be catastrophic to the state, it could very well be unsurvivable in large areas of Northeast Portland. And recovery, to the extent even possible, could last longer than the market for those fuels. It should also be noted that when we export fuels across the Pacific Ocean, we get them back in the form of greenhouse gases and pollution on the prevailing winds. The picture of how unsustainable that is becomes terrifyingly clear every day. Portland's Climate Action Plan sets a goal of 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We can't get there without moving faster than we are. And as part of that, we have to take some responsibility for the gases generated during and following export through our port. This is a global problem. The environmental, social, and economic repercussions, the human cost, depend on what happens in China just as much as what happens here. We can't, at least in the short term, count on effective actions at the federal level. I believe that Portland should exercise whatever authority it has to limit both local and global use of fossil fuels. This problem belongs to all of us. And after the events of this week, this is a time for us to show what stewardship of the environment and our neighborhood looks like. Maybe we can teach the rest of the nation what a future can be. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you all. We appreciate you
May I
very much.
ask a question of anybody who wants to answer it? Obviously, the big question here is, should we allow the 10% expansion in order to encourage building of tanks that are earthquake safe? And so I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on that specific question. Is it worth giving a little bit of expansion in order to get some seismic upgrades? Because we're not allowed by the state yet to just say you must do it by then. So where do each of you come down on yes or no on the 10%?
Well, I think that the 10% acts as an incentive if we can get something done. We need to get something done quickly. And that's the concern that I have. We need to not only get something done in terms of seismic issues. I'm really very concerned about the seismic issues. The report that you just heard from your city sustainability person was saying very clearly, there's 0 to maybe a few percent of those tanks that are in fact safe enough in case of an earthquake. And we're not talking about the huge earthquake, just an earthquake. And the fault line is right there. The liquefaction issues, I'm reminded of what took place during the World Series quake in San Francisco, where the downtown just became jello. If it becomes jello under those tanks, we lose North Portland.
Thank you. Other thoughts on that question?
I'm not sure exactly what the 10%, if it was at full capacity of all the terminals, that ends up being quite a lot. But I agree that whatever one can do to upgrade the tanks to be more safe. For example, what's happening with the railroad right now, they have these other tanks for shipping crude, but they're not going to be online for a long time. And in the meantime, the CEO of Union Pacific told us that, we're charging them more per tank to use the old ones, so the railroad's actually profiting more using the old tanks. So they don't have much incentive to get them online either. So I think it's a really crucial issue, and if that incentive could really manifest itself as a requirement, it's then it seems worth it, but otherwise it's bringing a larger burden to the situation.
And I think I would have to agree on behalf of the tribe. Philosophically, we would prefer to not have any expansion of capacity. And that being said, We understand that as the situation is today, there is really no other incentive to encourage that change. And being as aware as we are of the seismic issues here on the Willamette River and in the heart of Portland, with our community all around us, it seems that, safety has to be of a paramount importance. If this serves as that incentive, then I think it's perhaps necessary at this time, although unfortunate, we really don't want to see more fuel there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That helps.
That's very
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple more people to call, and then we'll turn to the sign-up sheet. We have a representative of our Planning and Sustainability Commission, the most overworked volunteers in Portland, Gary Oxman, and Pam Neal from the Portland Development Commission with an economic analysis. So, welcome, Dr. Oxman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hales, Commissioners, I'm Gary Oxman. I'm a member of the Planning Sustainability Commission. Let me offer a couple of framing comments to start with here. First of all, the Planning and Sustainability Commission was extremely enthusiastic in support of the resolution that passed by the City Council. So we're totally on board with that. We see that as an integral part of the Climate Action Plan and a very important step to be taking. We were also very concerned about safety and specifically the risk of an earthquake and large-scale earthquake. That kind of earthquake occurring in the high-risk soils where most of the fossil fuel infrastructure is located currently will produce a local and a regional environmental catastrophe, and it will also produce a local human health catastrophe. Surviving without fuels in the post-earthquake environment is going to be a very, very bleak situation. So that imbued a lot of the Commission's thinking. We also, while we did not take a formal position on other approaches to seismic improvement, we did have some rich conversation about that, and particularly the desirability of a comprehensive approach to seismic stabilization. As has been outlined by others, other panels, basically the Planning Commission took 4 changes to what was originally proposed to us as a policy in a zoning code. It reduced the size allowed for new fossil fuel tanks from 5 million down to 2 million gallons. And again, that was thought that produced adequate flexibility for people to continue their business and to blend environmentally sustainable fuels, but at the same time attempting to discourage the use of large unit trains for oil transport. Secondly, we went with the decision to go with a limited use rather than other options. Specifically, what we heard from testimony is that the current providers and the current businesses that run fossil fuel need some degree of certainty about what the environment is going to be. And so the limited use created a clear pathway to future seismic stabilization, and that was our major concern. Going along with that, the third recommendation was we decided not to require land use review. And again, we wanted the clear path, and it wasn't clear what a land use review would really add in terms of value to considering a proposal for tank replacement or seismic upgrade. And lastly, we added what we thought were some pretty good protections against aggregating of multiple small businesses into a larger business that effectively overcomes the limit. And so we tried to cut that off. So that was really, that was basically the approach that the commission took. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions for Dr. Oxman? Thank you very much. Appreciate your work on this and everything else we've put on your plate.
I'm sorry?
Appreciate your work on this and everything else we've put on your plate, so thank you.
Okay, well, on behalf of the commission, we thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neal, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Pam Neal, and I am the Clean Energy Liaison for the Portland Development Commission. I am going to give you testimony about Portland's clean tech economy. Portland's 40 years of progressive policy around climate and sustainable innovation has made the cities internationally renowned as a place that has found the balance between growth and the quality of life. In the past, it's been difficult to quantify the size of our clean tech sector because of the federal government's industrial classification system hasn't adapted to the industry. For example, an employee at Portland's Indo Windows would be classified under building materials rather than as a manufacturer of highly efficient window inserts. And a software engineer at Jaguar Land Rover, working on autonomous vehicles, would be classified under motor vehicles. Under the leadership of Mayor Hales, we recently did a pilot with the C40 Climate Leadership Group that sought to quantify what is called the low carbon economic goods and services sector. While the information hasn't been publicly released, we do have top-line analysis to share that can finally demonstrate a link between Portland's climate leadership and the creation of a sizable industry in itself. The data shows that the low-carbon economic goods and services sector is a $10 billion industry with an average of 5% growth since 2012. The sector has an employment of almost 47,000 and is composed of 2,450 companies. For more than 5 years, Portland has been in the enviable position of being a net exporter of low-carbon goods and services. It should be noted that this data that was modeled includes Clackamas and Washington counties, in addition to Multnomah, but we believe that this is an accurate look at the local sector. Other analysis we've conducted shows that the sector is very rich in middle-wage jobs, defined as earning higher than $42,000 per year and requiring less than a bachelor's degree. Portland has never been afraid to prioritize sustainability and the health and well-being of its people, as we've demonstrated by removing a highway on our waterfront and making a park. We were the first city in the U.S. to have a green infrastructure and a green building policy. We were early to sign up for the Kyoto Protocol, and we signed into the historic Paris Climate Agreement. We brought back the modern streetcar, and last fall celebrated the completion of a multimodal bridge that excludes cars. We've created a thriving and equitable 21st century economy that sees vast potential for growth as the world looks for solution in lowering carbon. In addition, we've created a Portland brand around sustainability and innovation that is recognized around the world, whether it's China, Japan, or our sister city in Guadalajara, Mexico, which I recently visited with a team of Portland clean tech firms, the state of Oregon, and the mayor's office. The trajectory of our climate policy has been working. We will continue to embrace the policies and the programs that have fostered a better city and job creation for Portland residents.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your work in
Thank you.
quantifying what we all hoped was happening in our city. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you both very much. Okay, we're going to turn to public testimony. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to give students a chance to come first. That's good news and bad news. It's good news because it's great to hear from students. It's bad news because they're a hard act to follow. But if you're here as a student, come on up and we'll give you first opportunity if you'd like that, or if you want to wait a while and come up later, that's okay too. So if there's some students in the chambers, either upstairs or down, come on up, please. Okay, well, that's good. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Hahn.
My name is Gabby Lemieux.
Tucker Holston. And we all attend Lincoln High School. It is great to once again see the members of the City Council after our visit here last Thursday. During our time in school, and especially in the first months of our environmental justice and sustainability class at Lincoln, we have learned about the issue of climate change. We have learned how, without immediate action, the fate of the world will be imperiled within our lifetimes. Many of the people in this room were alive as the entire world was held hostage by the imminent threat of nuclear annihilation presented by the arms race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. A tragic mistake could have resulted in the end of humanity as we know it. However, the issue of climate change is significantly more frightening. Unlike nuclear war, if we do nothing and simply continue down the path that we have followed for decades, climate change will wreak havoc on our world.
We have all lived in Portland our entire lives. We have visited other countries and states but we always long to return to the rich, green forests, the staggering, snow-capped mountains, the broad, powerful rivers, and the open-hearted people of the Northwest. Many times we have driven through the gorge and thought aloud how lucky we are to live in a place of such unparalleled majesty. But now, every time we witness the beauty of this corner of the world, we cannot escape a certain lingering sorrow. We imagine that so many of the things that we love might soon be gone. We see the trees parched, the mountains defeated and unable to carry snow, the rivers choked and empty of salmon, all ravaged by climate change. And these worries are not just contained to the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Across the world, it is already happening.
We constantly hear our elders say that this is the greatest issue of our time and that they shouldn't have left us with such a mess. While these things are true, we cannot afford for you to simply pass this issue on to us. We know that we have to stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure now if we are to have any hope of remaining within reasonable emission limits and preventing climate chaos. Yet fossil fuel companies continue to operate unchallenged by the government and intend to extract 5 times as much carbon as we can safely utilize. We don't have time to wait around for a few more decades, a few more election cycles. We need to start an aggressive transition to renewable energy now.
In spite of the challenges ahead, we have found huge sources of inspiration in our own communities. The walkout at Lincoln was a turning point for us and for many other students. We distinctly remember standing on the east side and looking across the Hawthorne Bridge. The line of students was so long that the protests spanned the entire bridge back to the west side. Over 1,000 students walked out on September 7th, demonstrating to us that we have the power to make our voices heard. When we saw that there were people willing to stand up for what they believe in, we knew we didn't have to wait around and hope for a better future. We knew that we could start shaping our own destiny. However, change cannot wait until our generation begins to run for public office and to write our own legislation. The change has to start with you. If we don't begin right now, by the time we're old enough to hold a public office, it will already be too late.
We heartily appreciate the City Council's support to stop the development of all new fossil fuel terminals and to limit the construction of petroleum storage tanks to under 2 million gallons. However, we must stress the need for tighter restrictions against any expansion of fossil fuel storage tanks. The City of Portland needs to do more than just ban holding tanks over 2 million gallons. We need a full ban on all new storage infrastructure. We can't allow a 10% volume expansion on tanks. This would make the city liable for millions of gallons of additional fuel capacity that would increase our potential future contributions to climate change or devastate the river and surrounding waterfront in the event of a seismic disaster. So, if a 10% volume expansion is truly the only way to ensure our safety in the event of a seismic disaster, then I simply express my frustration and hope deeply that the irony is understood by all of us and that our message will not be lost on fossil fuel companies.
We are done waiting. The initiatives already passed in this city should constitute the jumping off point for creating a better future for all, one that is healthy, just, and sustainable. We need a fundamental change in the way that we address our priorities. We must follow an ideal similar to that which was outlined in the Iroquois Confederacy. In our every deliberation, we must consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. This kind of thinking would allow us to stop acting as if short-term economic growth is more important than all else, and instead favor a cooperation among people, governments, and the earth for the greater good of all on this fragile planet. As NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft was flung out of the solar system at 11 miles per second, the onboard cameras were pointed back toward the Earth. Encapsulated in the glare of sunlight was a tiny, pale blue dot, a world teeming with life against the backdrop of near infinite and inhospitable space. This is our world, and we stand as a city in one small corner of it. While our world is, in a cosmic sense, fragile and small, this only verifies that as the caretakers of this world, we have the power to alter our course if we so choose. We have the chance to begin an aggressive global transition away from fossil fuels right here, right now in Portland. We believe that banning all expansion on fossil fuel storage facilities in the city of Portland is the only logical next step, the only one that can result in a promising future for the city and the world. We need to write the history of the world and be on the leading edge of change. With questionable support for climate action from the federal government for at least the next 4 years, the role of local governments in this movement will become much more important than it has already been. We urge you to do all you possibly can to confront this issue, for it is the greatest one our species has ever known, and your generation is the last that can put us on the right track in time.
Thank
Much.
you.
Thank you very much. We do make an exception and applaud for students here. Thank you very much for being here. You know, we do make that exception in part because frankly, some of the best moments of being on this council for us is what we do hear from students. We heard from students in our budget hearings about the importance of our parks programs. We hear from students about tough issues like bullying, and we hear from students about this issue, the most important of our time. So it's really, for us as policymakers, we get to listen to a lot of adults, but you're a special category, and that's why we give you special treatment, so welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mimi Rupert. And I'm Hailey Pivoto. And we are a part of the inaugural Environmental Justice and Sustainability class at Lincoln High School. Last week, in preparation for this hearing, our class marched down to City Hall to speak with Mayor Charlie Hales and City Commissioners Nick Fish, Amanda Fritz, Steve Novick, and Dan Saltzman. We demonstrated our utmost support for the ban on any new fossil fuel infrastructure through the strongest fossil fuel zoning codes up to date. And in return, we were praised for our student advocacy and direct action. When reflecting on the event later in the day, there was one word that seemed to perfectly sum up our morning: empowering. As students who have been studying climate change in the classroom for 2 years, we were ecstatic when given the incredible opportunity to take direct action and fight for our future and the future of generations to come.
There are a multitude of things you think about when you're young and considering your future. Your hopes, dreams, and aspirations, your family and career, and your happiness. And for the most young people, these fantasies are filled with optimism and excitement. But for those of my generation and the generations to follow, our futures are burdened with conditions, limitations, and destruction. We can no longer separate our future from the devastating effects of climate change, and so many people are already living this heartbreaking reality. We are lucky enough to live in a developed country with good infrastructure and desirable location, but many are shrouded in ignorance. As if this problem wasn't so bad. But climate change doesn't wait for anyone, and soon it will be our turn to face this devastation. Sadly, by the time our Earth reaches its boiling point, I will be turning around 46 years old. My potential children will be around my age now, and their climate will be completely different than the one I grew up with. They will not have the luxury of experiencing everything our beautiful Earth has to offer, because it will no longer be the planet as we know now.
In light of recent events, this ban is more important now than ever. With a leader who has no intention of addressing the severity of climate change and actually has the intention of setting us many steps back, it is imperative that Portland be at the forefront of this environmental movement and set an example for the rest of our nation. The city of Portland has already been such a pioneer in advocating for change, and this ban solidifies that. By banning all future expansions on fossil fuel storage infrastructure, we are promoting morality, we are promoting justice, and we are promoting a better future. So please consider our lives as the next generation of leaders, the lives of those already suffering, and the lives of those yet to be born when making pivotal decisions such as the one to be made today. Thank you.
Both. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Peter Solinger. I go to Grant High School. Tuesday, November 8th, 2016, we elected our next president. In doing so, we elected a man who believes, among many other things, that climate change is a hoax created by the Chinese, and that because it was snowing in New York, we need global warming. We elected Donald Trump, a man who has refused and will continue to refuse to listen to the science that has been proven over and over again. And in a time like this, we have a tendency to panic, to say, what have we come to? And to walk away from everything we have been fighting for. But we cannot. For it is in these times that we must stand up. And as Hillary Clinton said on Wednesday, please never stop believing that fighting for what's right is worth it. Today, we have a historic opportunity to do what's right and to walk the talk. We have the opportunity to show cities around the nation that we can make a difference and that we will continue to fight for our children and our children's children, no matter who stands in our way, and that we will live up to the green image that people across our country conjure when they think of Portland. Today, we as Portlanders must take this huge step towards preserving our world for all those that will follow us. We will show everyone that Portland will not back down from leading by example and that we are not afraid to make a difference. I hope that after today, we will be able to look back on what we have done and celebrate this as a historical accomplishment and one that shall not be forgotten. That being said, I believe there are still things we can do to make this an even stronger victory. Let's fix any loopholes that allow for smaller facilities and take out anything allowing for facilities to get 10% larger in exchange for seismic upgrades. We here in Portland should not have to exchange bigger facilities for safer facilities. We need to lead by telling fossil fuel companies that keeping the people of Portland safe is an obligation, not just something they do merely for the sake of creating larger facilities. I hope that today we can honor those who will come after us by showing the world who we are in Portland. I would like to thank the mayor as well as the rest of City Council for leading the way and voting to ensure that Portland is safer and more environmentally friendly, and by showing our nation that despite setbacks, we will continue to fight for what we know is right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks very much. Any more students to come up? A few more? Yes, come on, please. Welcome.
My name is Sophia Smith, and I am 16 years old, meaning I can't vote. I am scared for my future because for the next 2 years, I have little voice in it. I am counting on this city council, who are the voice for our city, to act responsibly to protect my home and protect my generation and those after me. For we are the people who will have to live through the decisions we make today and in the future. 2 days ago, our country elected a president who thinks climate change is a hoax. What does that mean for the future of this earth, as the U.S. is the second largest contributor of fossil fuels and carbon emissions? Having Trump elected, I'm not only scared for the basic treatment of all Americans, but I am scared if I will even have a future where I can keep fighting for human equality. We have so much power in our country to lead the way and shape our future. It starts with local governments who have the ability to take a strong position. We are fortunate in that in the Pacific Northwest, we don't see immediate extreme impacts of climate change, but by the time we experience the repercussions, it will be too late. We have to stop thinking about profit and think about all the people in this world who are affected by our actions. We are not asking for a lot, but we need to take a stand and stand firm and allow no expansion or creation of fossil fuel terminals. Our window for stopping global warming is slowly closing, meaning why would we create this resolution if we are going to do less than we can? Instead of doing a second-rate job, which we have done so many countless times in the past, we need to do as much as we possibly can, so all of us have a future I am proud to live in. All we have time for is to take action and to do it right. If we weaken this resolution, time will run out before we have a chance to fix our mistakes. When you were children, did you think about the health of this planet and worry if you were going to have a future? Did you have to stand in front of your government just so your life would be protected? That is what I have to do because my future is being put below the wealth of companies and endangering our planet. As a country, we need to realize the only people we want to help with a decision like this is ourselves. That means we can't weaken our actions. We have to do all that is physically possible. Last year, when the City Council unanimously passed this resolution to create a stronger regulation for fossil fuel companies and no new fossil fuel infrastructure, I was so proud to live in Portland, and I began to feel hopeful for my future. I want to live in a world where I am proud of the actions of our government and what they have taken, so I can live a happy, healthy life. That can start here in Portland, Oregon, by standing firm on no new fossil fuel infrastructure or expansions. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Who'd like to be next?
Hello, my name is Shannon Doyle. I'm 12 years old and go to Sunnyside Environmental School. I am here today because it is a human right to have clean air and water. I have grown up in this wonderful city. Its rainy winters and hot summers, its beautiful masterpieces. The Columbia River Gorge has in some ways made me who I am. It taught me how to hike, it taught me how to fall, it taught me what my place is in the world. And most importantly, it taught me how to be myself. The Columbia Gorge has shown me how I am connected to every living thing. That is why we must do everything we can to protect all life. I recently read an article published in The Guardian about the estimated decrease of animal populations. In this article, Damian Carrington states that animal populations plummeted by 58% between 1970 and 2012, with losses on track to reach 67% by 2020. Researchers from World Wildlife Fund and the Zoologic Society of London compiled the report from scientific data. In 4 years, I will be 16 years old. In that time, if we do not decrease our fossil fuel consumption, more than half of our current animal populations will be gone, extinct. Portland, Oregon is leading the nation to clean energy. We have risen together to do so many amazing things. We have dangled from bridges and blockaded Shell's Spinnaker. We have a Portland Climate Action Plan, as well as a Portland Public School Climate Literacy Resolution. Last year, when you voted for no fossil fuel infrastructure, it gave me hope that we would soon meet our city's goal to achieve 40% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. That means we must follow up and stay strong. We cannot be weak. We cannot have any more fossil fuel infrastructure built. We must not let companies make short-time profit and endanger the lives of residents of Portland and our own blue dot Earth. Together, we can say yes to clean air, clean water, and a healthy planet. Thank you for your time and opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Jack Strobel from Sunnyside Environmental School. Fossil fuels are not going to go away on their own. They're like a weed. We need to pull up its roots or it will never go away. We just can't take out its head and hope it'll leave. It's about time that Portland became independent of fossil fuels. We have a golden opportunity and we need to use it to better our lives, to improve our city, to say no to new fossil fuel infrastructure. Have you ever been to Los Angeles? There's oil rigs everywhere, even in the city. And worst of all, there's a giant small cloud that covers the city from all fossil fuel emissions. I don't want that to happen to our beautiful city of Portland. I don't want the Willamette River to be lined with fossil fuel infrastructure. I don't want a cloud of smog to circle over our city. We don't want oil pipelines snaking through Forest Park. And we can't risk it. Just one oil storage silo could break and it would flood into the Willamette, killing thousands of fish. Then it would flush into the Columbia, hurting the already endangered salmon. Then finally flushing into the ocean, blackening our beaches. We don't need another oil spill epidemic. What we need is to say no. We can resist fossil fuels. We can switch to renewable energy. We can install solar, build more windmills, improve our dams. We just have to resist and fight. The people of Portland want this. The men, women, and children of Portland want this. Do it for the people of the city. Together, we can cut out fossil fuels. We can say no. Say no to all the fossil fuels. We are saying no, and so can you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay. Any other students besides these? Come on up with them if you want. Okay, you may be the batting cleanup for the student team, so welcome.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Wardlaw, and I am 14 years old. As young people in a country currently very divided on such an important topic, we are at times voiceless. Without the ability to vote, it is easy to be left out of the political process. That said, we are the generation that will be the most impacted by decisions like these. Prohibiting fossil fuel expansion and standing up to the corporate greed that drives climate change deniers sets a vital precedent for the rest of the country. At a time in politics where many governmental leaders refuse to acknowledge the effect humans have on climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, it is now more than ever extremely important to take action on this delicate and time-sensitive issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Hannah Witcher, and I'm 15 and a freshman at Grant High School. The Republican Congress and the president-elect have made it very clear that they do not view climate change as the important topic and the threat that it is to today's world. If they will not act, it is our duty to. If we can make a difference, we must. We should not value the life, health, and safety of the people in our community as lower than the chance of a company to make a profit. We need to say that oil companies and fossil fuels are a bad thing, and that they are a huge risk to our environment, both the actual oil and the carbon dioxide that they produce. The global warming is a huge issue, and if we can make a difference, we must. We have to fight for our future before it is gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome.
Hi. Hi, my name is Lily Mason.
And I'm Olivia Magritte, and we are students from Sunnyside Environmental School.
Last year, 3 of our fellow friends and students came here to testify against any future fossil fuel infrastructure development in the Portland area. The council unanimously approved this resolution and promised to enforce it. This felt like such a breakthrough and start of a healthier community. But now we feel cheated. With these proposed rules, new infrastructure with under 2 million gallons of fuel would be accepted. This would allow more greenhouse gases to be emitted into our atmosphere, which is harmful to everyone, everywhere, and there's no way we can ignore that. We also know that any new fossil fuel infrastructure that would be built, no matter what size, would be here for at least 20 years or more, and we don't have time for that. The fossil fuel industry has known for decades about global warming, and we don't understand why they should be rewarded for destroying our planet.
Right now, Portland has a chance to prohibit all new fossil fuel terminals and require our existing facilities to make seismic safety improvements without expanding. As 13-year-olds, this really matters to us. Our planet is in serious trouble. Humans are killing the earth and each other. As you know, all fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases and other harmful pollutants when burned. These emissions lead to serious, universal, and irreversible consequences. We are already beginning to see the impacts climate change has on our way of life. Polar ice sheets and glaciers are melting, resulting in rising seas. Temperatures are increasing, and many plant and animal species are at risk of extinction. It is our responsibility to do something to fix this. Building more fossil fuel facilities is not the answer and bypasses all progress our city has made to break free from fossil fuel dependence.
Our dream is that someday Portland will be able to run on almost all renewable energy. We can only accomplish this if we stand up for what we believe in and protect the place that we call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I told you there'd be a hard act to follow. I cannot imagine a more of a contrast between the disheartening insanity of this week and the hopeful leadership that we see from young people in this community. Let's hear it for our students.
Before you go, students.
Before you go, students.
Before you go, please. As we learned that we are not allowed to just require the tanks to become seismically upgraded. So we're going to need your help to go down to the legislature in the new year to get that changed. We're having... So in 10 days' time, on December 1st, we're going to be holding a legislative agenda advocacy training at the city, and it's going to be at Tabor Space on Southeast Belmont. It's from 6 to 8, and you'd be very welcome to come so that we can help you prepare for making your case to the legislature, because I hope you do just what you did now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I add another
please.
special request to the
Yes.
students? The fight against climate change takes many forms, and we here at the council are going to take up an issue soon, which relates very much, which is to what extent do we require new parking to be built with new residences? And when we require new parking spots to be built, then that continues to build society around the car, which encourages people to keep on driving and releasing carbon. So I hope that you will turn out to encourage this council to reduce parking minimums as part of the effort against climate change.
All
Thank you
these
so much
opportunities for activism.
And just one more thing. Commissioner Novick calls it climate disruption, which I think is much clearer than climate change. Climate change is having a 70-degree day on November 10th here in Portland, Oregon. It's nice if you happen to like walking outside without a coat, but it's just not right. So we've got to all be very focused on, I think, the language that we use and the way that we use it, so we're all working together in the ways that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Okay, because like I said, it's going to be a hard act to follow, so we're going to move to the sign-up sheet. And if you are here and you have a disability, or if you have some childcare needs and want to get early in the queue, just come to our council clerk as we proceed, and we'll scroll you in early in the process. But let's go to the sheet, and then folks that need to indicate that can come let you know, Carla.
We'll have a total list.
Some of these folks may have been called because they
Yeah,
might have
I've
been
got-
students, so. we'll
I
see.
think I've got them off the list.
Okay.
And I have a remaining 54 total testifiers. Let's go ahead with the first three will be Gregory Monahan, Marilyn Sewell, and Mia Reback. That's 1, 2, and 3 on the first list. And then we'll go with Rob Mathers, Ellen Wax, and David Cons on the second list, 1, 2, and 3.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Gregory Monahan. I'm here in my capacity as the chair of the Beyond Gas and Oil team for the Oregon chapter of the Sierra Club, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club. The Oregon chapter of the Sierra Club supports an implementation of the fossil fuel infrastructure policy, which does not allow for any expansion of bulk fossil fuel terminals. It is clear to anyone who understands science or who is willing to look dispassionately at the evidence that climate change is real and that its effects are evident today. It is also clear that the consequences of ignoring greenhouse gas emissions will lead to a future in which the lives of our children and grandchildren will be very difficult. The results of the recent elections also make it clear that we cannot rely upon our national leaders to solve this problem for us. Leadership will have to come from the bottom up, starting right here in our city. The United Nations just released a report on the emissions gap. That is the difference between the amount of greenhouse gas emissions needed to keep the temperature of the world from rising beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius and the amount we are currently emitting. The news is not good. In short, we need to radically reduce the amount of fossil fuels we are using, and we need to begin doing so now. Additionally, the staff report of the Planning and Sustainability Commission makes it clear that overall demand for fossil fuels is already flat. It is reasonable to expect a decline as more electric vehicles are put into service. There is absolutely no rational basis for expanding fossil fuel infrastructure. Nowhere in the language of the resolution that you passed last year, about a year ago, does it list exemptions which allow for the expansion of the described infrastructure. In light of what we know about our climate and our national policies, it is imperative that we do not continue to expand fossil fuel infrastructure. Therefore, the Sierra Club urges you to modify the language of the proposed ordinance to eliminate the 2 million gallon minimum and to eliminate the allowed expansion for seismic upgrades. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Sewell, and I am the Minister Emerita of the First Unitarian Church, and I just have to say that hearing those young people just broke my heart, So beautiful. This council, led by Mayor Charlie Hales, has passed the strongest land use code in the country, prohibiting all new infrastructure for fossil fuel export. Look at this picture. I think you will remember this incident.
Yes, we do.
Yes. Tiny kayaktivist and Greenpeace activists hanging from the St. John's Bridge. They stopped Shell's massive icebreaker for 48 hours, and pictures like this went around the world. Then through our emissary, Mayor Hales, once more our witness went around the world, to the Pope, to President Obama. And now again, the whole world is watching. In light of this election, what will happen to the climate movement? Do not think that what happens in this city council today is unimportant or a little thing. And of course, on November 17, we are important to the larger world. We know that the rest of the country watches what Portland does in many arenas, and certainly in regard to climate. And so we are here today not just to testify, but to witness. Now, I'm using religious language because this is truly the greatest moral issue of our day, or one might say of any day. We will all be accountable as moral agents if we fail to keep fossil fuel in the ground, all of it. The temptation always is to accommodate to power, but rather we must speak truth to power. In the words of that wonderful Spike Lee movie, do the right thing. It's in your hands. Do the right thing.
Thank you, Marilyn. You're wonderful. Speaking of people that had something to do with the Fenneca, welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Hale, City Council, thank you for considering today's amendments to prohibit bulk fossil fuel terminals. My name is Mia Reback, and I am one of the staff organizers with 350 PDX. Almost exactly a year ago, we came before the City Council, and when we passed the city's opposition to new fossil fuel infrastructure in our city or adjacent waterways. And when we did that, we said no to the long-term investments that lock us into polluting carbon emissions for decades to come, preventing any hope of meeting our carbon goals and our climate goals. When talking about new fossil fuel infrastructure, we're not talking about the next few years of fuel use. We're talking about the next 5 decades and the long-term course we as a city and planet will take. Now is our chance to turn that resolution into binding land use law by changing our city code, sending a signal around the world and to our fossil fuel industry here that we are protecting our people, our land, our water, and climate. Just last week, the Paris Climate Agreement went into effect, stating that world leaders are committed to keeping global warming between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. But a recent study by Oil Change International, aptly titled "The Sky's Limit," found that the committed emissions of our existing fossil fuel infrastructure alone will blow us past 2 degrees Celsius. The principal finding of that study, which I think to some is quite depressing, to me is very hopeful. They found that in order to keep within these globally agreed upon limits, we must build no new fossil fuel infrastructure. Not some, none. No coal, no oil, no gas. And that governments who are prepared to move away from existing fossil fuels have to begin that managed decline immediately. Fossil fuels aren't going to go away overnight, but the actions we take today will dictate the future course of where they go. I encourage the City Council to pass bolder versions of the fossil fuel terminal zoning code amendments. We should not be trading our safety for increased fossil fuel facilities. I encourage you to get rid of the allowance for 10% expansions and to look into further restrictions on small terminals in addition to prohibiting bulk fossil fuel facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, let's take the next 3, please.
Are Rob Mathers, Ellen Wax, and David Collins. And they'll be followed by Nick Caleb, Alan Smith, and Dick Harmon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Mathers, and I am not a climate disruption denier. And I feel like we have been invited to a barbecue and we're on the menu. We are opposed to the fossil fuel terminal zoning amendments, and there's 2 principal reasons. I was going to go into the bottleneck reason first. In order to use renewable fuels. They have to be blended with conventional fuels, at least in the foreseeable future. And if there's a bottleneck created, and if volumes have to be trucked in to the region or the state from outside the region or state, then that is just the opposite of where you want to go with limiting greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions. With respect to the seismic resiliency issue, we feel that this will lead to disinvestment in the bulk fossil fuel terminals, which will result in no improvements to seismic resiliency. My company, Kinder Morgan, and I'm here representing both the Working Waterfront Coalition today and Kinder Morgan, our core values are to operate safely and compliantly and reliably. And we rebuilt a tank in Linton. We increased the capacity by 30%, but that's what it took to justify the investment. And in Wilbridge, we increased our capacity, our overall capacity, by about 23%, which is seismically resilient now, as is the tank in Linton, such that, but it took a 20% increase in the capacity there at Wilbridge to justify that investment. So we feel that Portland is not an island, and that instead of being visionary and exemplary, that these land use restrictions and zoning changes are actually short-sighted and very self-centered. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Could I just ask you a question?
Yes.
You saw the the gas explosion in Northwest.
Yes.
And so wouldn't your tanks that aren't seismically stable, if there was an earthquake, wouldn't they produce an explosion many times more than that?
I don't know if there would be an explosion. I don't know if there would be release. It could possibly happen, yes.
So is your company not worried about liability in that instance?
Yes, we are.
So I think the reason for the, and we'll talk about this some more, the reason for the 10% allowance was we would hope that people would basically try to take market share from somebody else and within the existing capacity by building a seismically resistant tank. And we could maybe do that with a 0 rather than a 10% allowance, but I'm saying that our hope would be that companies that are worried about liability or have old tanks could in effect take that capacity from their competitors by building a safe one. And we're not sure if we calibrated that right. You said these last two expansions you did were 20 or 30%.
That's correct.
That was what was necessary. You weren't necessarily taking market share. Well, maybe you were, given that demand is flat. You're taking market share from somebody else.
But there has been, last year, gasoline rose 2%, natural gas demand countrywide rose 3%. There probably are going to be more vehicle miles traveled here in Oregon.
They're actually going down here. And we're happy about that.
Yeah.
They're going down in
I don't know.
the metro
Maybe
area.
we need to check the latest statistics on that.
Yeah.
But
Okay, well, appreciate that.
So you're saying that the 10% increase isn't going to foster any change?
no, that is correct. It's going to not foster change, and it's going to lead to disinvestment, and it's going to lead to these facilities being stranded. And if that's what your intention is, you will achieve that goal.
So, Mayor, I think you put that forward as an incentive. If it's not, then I think we should have a discussion about whether we need it or not.
Right. Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Hales, Commissioners. Thank you for having me and the opportunity to provide comments on these zoning amendments. My name is David Kuntz, and I work for Tidewater Barge Lines. We're a tug and barge company headquartered in the Pacific Northwest and employ approximately 275 people. Tidewater has been in business since 1932 and is the largest inland marine transportation company west of the Mississippi River, with 16 tugboats, 170 barges, and 5 marine terminals. Tidewater's vessels help move millions of tons of freight every year on the Pacific Northwest waterways, reducing congestion on the state's highways and railroads while producing far fewer pollutants and carbon emissions than trucks and trains transporting equivalent tonnage. Likewise, our industry statistics and safety record show that the towing industry in the Pacific Northwest has one of the best programs for moving commodities securely and safely in our region. We've reviewed the proposed zoning changes that are concerned. These will restrict economic development in the Pacific Northwest. We feel energy terminals can be built, expanded, and operated safely in the city of Portland. These terminals have the ability to create positive economic impact and support new and existing family wage jobs in our region. And the other thing we wanted to bring from our perspective as a waterway user is that these may have unintended environmental consequences looking at the big picture. These changes would create uncertainty about these terminals' existence, and to Rob's points earlier about them being stranded on an island, if they go away, they're key to the fuel supply network of our region and the eastern sides of Oregon and Washington. For example, barging supplies about 50% of the fuel that's consumed in the Tri-Cities area. And barging also, a 4-barge configuration is usually how they're transported, takes about 538 trucks off the road and 140 rail cars off the road. So if the terminals go away and the demand still is there, even if it's flat or slightly decreasing, they're still going to need their fuel, and it's going to go through other methods. So that's, for every barge load that goes, that's a potential of 538 trucks or 140 rail cars traveling along the Columbia River Gorge. So in conclusion, Tidewater is an advocate for environmental stewardship and hopes the city of Portland will consider a constructive dialogue with us and other stakeholders to generate an implementable fossil fuel distribution policy that addresses climate change, public safety, and environmental protection without significantly adversely impacting the viability of Oregon's economy and its waterfront industry. Thank you for the consideration and the time to share our viewpoint.
Thank you very much. Ellen, welcome.
Hi, Ellen Wax with the Working Waterfront Coalition. The Working Waterfront Coalition supports the intent for seismic safety and improvements and emission reduction. We do not believe this is a tool that will achieve the goal. We have concern about the unintended consequences for seismic upgrades resulting in disincentives. The Working Waterfront Coalition has submitted a letter of testimony to the record, and for the record, on it, the WWC thinks there is an ambiguity, never mind, in the Planning Commission's recommendation specific to the storage structures definition. It's not clear whether the limits on growth relate only to fossil fuel storage tanks or whether the limits on growth relate to pipes and other fossil fuel facilities associated with existing terminals. It is our understanding from discussion with city staff that the city's intent is to limit growth related to the existing storage tank capacity, and it does not intend to limit growth related to pipes and other fossil fuel facilities and infrastructure. We have submitted to the record clarifying amendments that address this issue by specifically stating fossil fuel storage tanks in the language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Thank you all. Thank you. Okay, let's take the next 3, please.
Are Nick Caleb, Alan Smith, and Dick Harmon. And they'll be followed by Lightning Watchdog PDX, Adam Smith, and Sarah Taylor.
Welcome.
Greetings.
Go ahead, Nick.
I dressed up for you today. I think last year I was here, I was in a red t-shirt. I got a new shirt since then that's red. So, my name is Nicholas Caleb. I'm the staff attorney for Neighbors for Clean Air and a professor at Concordia University. Today I'm delivering testimony on behalf of the Center for Sustainable Economy, and my boss, Mary Pivoto, I think is going to give testimony for NCA in a little bit. So last November, after a year of wild action and debate about our role in the regional and global climate action, we passed the Fossil Fuel Infrastructure Resolution. It was a huge milestone. We did this because fossil fuels pose health and safety risks to Portlanders and pretty much everywhere across the site of extraction, through transport, and when we combust these fuels. Since this time, as has been mentioned, actually far more eloquently than I can by youth today, the threats have become more severe, both political and scientific. And not only have the threats become more severe, but the city of Portland has actually taken its fight outside of the city boundaries as well. And so we've become involved in regulatory processes with regard to oil trains. We've also submitted resolutions in support of the standing rock blockade of fossil fuel infrastructure. And so our cards are on the table. We're committed to this as a matter of policy, and now it's just a time to tie the bow on top of it. Having said that, I think we can still improve the policy in front of us. I think the dialogue that we just heard was very useful in understanding a key point of this, whether allowing for a 10% increase in existing capacity is going to actually serve as an adequate sweetener for investment. Representatives of an international fossil fuel company just told you that it won't. So I think we should believe them. But the option isn't to allow 30% upgrades. We're not going to do that. And so I think what is in front of us is that we knock down that cap on existing infrastructure. We draw a strong line in the sand, and we move forward from there into a renewable energy economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome. Who'd like to go next?
My name is Alan Smith, and I'm a Portland resident. Natural gas is not a clean fuel. Saying it's clean because burning it is less carbon intensive than the fuel it replaces is like saying smoking tobacco is healthy because it won't kill you as quickly as smoking opiates. Over a 20-year period, methane is 84 times more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, and fugitive emissions have increased more than 30% above EPA's estimate over the last decade. One scientist has said this is almost certainly due to fracking. According to the IPCC, 40 to 70% of species would be doomed to extinction by global warming of 3.5 degrees Celsius. Climate change is estimated to kill 400,000 people per year already, and the number is projected to exceed 600,000 by 2030. Billions of people migrating to avoid starvation from drought would cause chaos around the world. To have a 66% chance of keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, 68%, over 2/3 of the proven reserves must remain in the ground. The fuel terminal representatives claim these amendments are emotionally driven. This is a false argument and an arrogant one at that. It's also an example of attacking your opponent's character when you can't win the debate with rational arguments. It's true the dire warnings we hear from the scientific community stir emotion, especially when we hear that the damage to life on Earth is proceeding faster than predicted. But we should all remember that it's not just local jobs or lives that matter, and there are no good jobs on a dead planet. I urge you to eliminate the allowance of a 10% expansion of existing terminals and support the recommendation of pursuing seismic safety through building code changes at the state level. Since the recommended draft was written, Jack's LNG announced plans for a 2 million gallon facility in
Keep going. That's all right. Go ahead, finish, please.
another sentence, in Jacksonville, Florida, intended to supply bunker barges for distribution on the East Coast. The 2 million gallon threshold should be also limited so that facilities like that can't be built in Portland. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Dick Harmon. I live in Portland. I'm 80. I'm here as father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. I support 350's position on the ordinance, and I want to thank the council, especially Mayor Hales, for stepping firmly into our new reality. We have run out of time on climate. So the small adjustments as incentives is offensive. It is deeply offensive. We don't have time for that kind of stuff. We have, in my view, just been threatened by disinvestment. My reaction to that is, let them disinvest. Let them reinvest by making up for the increase in demand by changing their business plan to invest in renewables and deep conservation. The other question here at root, in my view, listening to this, is we have a liquid fuels catastrophe coming at us. So the mobilization of the people and the institutions of Portland to electrify transportation is critical. It's stupid that we're in this argument over the safety of these tanks. cut the liquid and go to electrification of transportation. We will back you if you lead on this thing. It's going to take big money. We can raise that money as a community to invest in that kind of electricity. We can negotiate with Detroit to speed up the entry of electric vehicles as a body of people. So we don't have to take this stuff that the fossil fuel guys are saying. I guess my last point is, it's about the children. And I can't say it any better than the kids did. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
The next three are Lightning Watchdog PDX, Adam Smith, and I'm sorry, I skipped number 7, Bonnie McKinley. You're in this group. I hear it's Lightning, Adam Smith, and Bonnie McKinley. Okay, let's play Bonnie, thank you. And after them, our next was Rhea Sally, number 17, number 20, Paul Spindle, and 21, Doris Weller.
There's a little button on the base of that microphone. Just push it and it'll light up. There you go.
I go to garage sales.
Oh,
I
put
sit
your name
upon-
in the record. I'm sorry. Just put your name in the record first. Sorry.
Oh, Bonnie McKinley.
Thank you.
I go to garage sales. I sit upon my voyages as a garage sailor in the 1970s. One Saturday in that long past decade, I was garage sailing through southeast Portland. One sail stood out for its remarkable treasure trove of cheap, cool stuff. I asked the couple why they were selling their precious belongings for so little. They explained that they were being forced to leave their neighborhood. They had to clear out fast. Holding this garage sale was just a small piece of the larger preparations to leave their home of 50 years. Why? They had been penciled out of their longtime neighborhood. Their homes and hundreds of others lie in the path of 8 lanes of zooming vehicles, the proposed Mount Hood Freeway. The plan was to have east to west freeways rolled out in the southeast Powell Division neighborhoods. To the north and south, additional freeways would plow through the Prescott and Selwood neighborhoods. Federal funds were in place. This thing was happening. Except, as you may have noticed, Portland still has those sweet, tree-blessed neighborhoods. The city of Portland changed course. It used its brains and heart and traded a foul-smelling freeway for a planning prize that continues to impress the nation. Light rail, our MAX lines. Things can change for good. Policies, city leadership, economic viabilities, and public sentiment can change and make sense for the good of residents and for the environment. We can use our brains. We still have hearts. Let's use them when considering the perpetuation of fossil fuel infrastructure. No new climate bashing projects. We will work for energy conservation and renewable energy and for all the employment they can bring to our city. City of Portland, commissioners, people, impress the nation again. This time with a glorious, robust, visionary fossil fuel infrastructure resolution.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Sarah Taylor, and I'm here to talk to you about the past and current and future effect of fossil fuels on newborn and maternal health in the United States, in particular to premature babies. I live in Lytton. I live in a place of 2 rivers, of lakes, of wetlands, and Forest Park. I live in the historic Lytton community that was annexed by the city of Portland in 1915 for what looks like the sole purpose of turning a river community into a fossil fuel and Superfund site. In 1962, the state of Oregon bulldozed Lytton to make way for more fossil fuel infrastructure. Our small community has asked for a riverfront piece of land so we could rebuild, and year after year, this city council has denied a small park, a small piece of the river, so that the fossil fuel community can continue to take over that river community. But today, I am here as a midwife in North Portland. I have delivered over 2,000 babies, most of them in your city. I am here to share that the impact of the fossil fuel industry on the unborn children of our community is devastating. Right now, the United States is 36th in maternal and newborn health. This is largely because of environmental factors. African American and Native American babies are 2.5 times more likely to die in the first year of their life, and it is increasingly obvious that this is because of fossil fuels. We live not just downstream, we live up and down a pipeline. I'm from Pennsylvania, where there is fracking. Johns Hopkins University did a study. Babies born where there is fracking, where our oil will come from, are dying. They are costing money. They have huge medical bills. They have lifelong challenges. That oil is coming through a pipeline at the expense of unborn babies. The fossil fuel fumes destroy women's estrogen. Read the science. I will give you the studies. So you are not just destroying one baby's life by making it be born premature. You are destroying its genetic makeup. You know the fish in that river are in trouble. The mothers on the banks of that river in my North Portland community are in trouble. It is not because of poverty. It is not that our students in North Portland cannot learn. It's because we have polluted their rivers, their air, their soil, their mothers' uteruses, their wombs. So that is downriver in Pennsylvania where the fracking is happening. In North Portland, you know that you just failed to agree to clean up the Superfund sites, 16 of them, and now you are saying that you are going to increase the hazard for North Portland children. I also worked in Haiti.
I want to ask you to wrap up
Okay.
and let you go over a little bit,
Okay,
because this is
sorry.
a new point about
This
the
is a new point. Okay,
impact
so
on
I just
health.
want to tell you, downpipe, I've worked in Haiti for the last 5 years. I've watched hundreds of babies die. So what you do here impacts North Portland, the fracking babies, and the babies on the other end. And I ask you to think about the babies when you make that decision.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
The next three are 17, 20, and 21, Rhea Sally, Paul Spindle, and Doris Weller. And they'll be followed by 22,
Thank you very
23,
much.
and 24, Rob Lee, Eileen Fromer, and Deborah Romerain.
Welcome. Come on in.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for giving us, all of us, the opportunity to speak with you today. I support a full ban
Oh, just
on...
give us your name first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Kind of new to this. My name is Ryan Salee. Thank you. Thanks again for giving us this opportunity. I support a full ban on all new fossil fuel terminals, large and small, and ask you to eliminate the exception for projects below 2 million gallons. Additionally, I understand that there are other mechanisms to encourage seismic upgrades, and to the extent that those can be employed, I support them over a 10% increase in capacity at existing terminals. As if climate disruption alone were not enough, derailments in Mosier and elsewhere, have given us a multitude of reasons to ask that the City of Portland create policy that reduces oil train traffic through our precious Columbia River Gorge, not increase it. Climate change is the most pressing issue we face globally, and we cannot allow short-term corporate profit gain to trump the health of our people, the safety of our communities, and the environmental viability of this region. The City of Portland has the incredible opportunity, and I believe responsibility, to continue to lead the way for other cities to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mayor Hales and Commissioners, my name is Doris Weller, and I'm here as a very concerned citizen and a Linton resident. With our country about to be taken over by a man who has vowed to reverse environmental laws and dismantle EPA, now is the time to stand up boldly to the fossil fuel industries to stop kowtowing to big oil interests who are trying to make the city back down on this historic ordinance, when actually there's a need to expand on this ordinance to assure safety. The Cascadia earthquake, along with other fault lines, make the location where the tank farms are located the worst possible place. Natural hazards are not the only problem that will result in environmental catastrophes of epic proportions. In the last few years, we have had 3 near misses due to accidents that would have achieved the same disastrous results. Do not exempt Northwest Natural from fossil fuel amendments. Many small tanks can quickly add up to a large storage facility. Goal 7 of Oregon Land Use Law states that cities must or should pass zoning laws where hazards cannot be mitigated. Circle law requires responsibility. Make sure that insurance or assurance bond coverage is enough to include not only the environmental cost of destruction and cleanup, but also the loss of life and property. And if fossil fuel industries will not or cannot acquire such insurance, then they should be required to move to safer ground. Make the tank farms move if they will not upgrade seismically to the highest standards needed. Do not allow storage of railroad cars filled with hazardous materials to be stored in this area, sometimes for days on end. This amounts to mobile storage of fossil fuels. The dangers are greatly increased by railroad switching that takes place in the Linton-Wilbridge area, and there are many uncontrolled railroad intercrossings in Linton with tanker trucks loaded with volatile fuels crossing over them. Taxpayers, neighborhoods, families, the environment should not have to bear the consequences and costs of fossil fuel industries that favor profits over people. For all your constituents, don't back down on the original ordinance of no new expansion. Make a bold statement, protect us.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Next 3 are Rob Lee, Eileen Fromer, and Deborah Romerain. And they'll be followed by 25, 26, and 27, Dr. Theodora Songas, Julie Chapman, and Mary Vogel.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Eileen Fromer. Mayor Hales, commissioners, thank you. Climate change and greenhouse gas emissions will not stop because President-elect Donald Trump is coming to the White House. This city must remain committed to transitioning to clean energy and to meet its 2050 carbon reduction goals. Every step we take as a community to keep fossil fuels in the ground and transition to sustainable energy is essential to stop global warming and the catastrophes it brings to life on Earth. Portland has the opportunity to be an example of how communities can come together and get it done. Do not accept the 10% expansion of fossil fuel infrastructures tied to seismic upgrades. That's like getting married and say, well, I'm only married for 5 days a week. That expansion is not necessary to achieve the seismic upgrades and is obviously a sneaky backdoor way to allow fossil fuel expansion. Seismic resilience and upgrades are important and necessary to achieve as soon as possible for at-risk fossil fuel storage tanks. However, there is no reason to tie this to the expansion of current fossil fuel facilities. Specifically,
I encourage you to remove the words plus 10% from page 49 of the PSC's recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome. Whoever would like to go next?
My name's Rob Lee. When the gasoline tanker truck crashed into the rail tank cars last December, just imagine how the first firefighters on the scene felt when they saw that the numbers on the 8 tank cars on the siding indicated asphalt instead of Bakken oil or ethanol. As it happened, the gasoline fire burned itself out after hours instead of having tank cars exploding right next to a giant liquefied natural gas tank in a chemical plant with its tanks of liquefied hydrogen. Now imagine how city leaders would feel explaining how the city of Portland allows so many exceptionally dangerous components to exist so close together, and how we could only watch as the ensuing chain reaction of catastrophic fire made its way along the river. Can't happen? Let me remind you that this was one of 3 recent tank fires, rail tank fires in our area. Obviously, adding any new infrastructure to this ridiculously dangerous situation is a fool's errand. It's long since time to begin moving the tank farms to safer places, not adding to a situation that might explode even before the earthquake. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Deborah Romarin. Nope, it's not dead yet. Contrary to some recent reports, Australia's Great Barrier Reef has not been completely snuffed out, not yet. Only a quarter of the world's largest reef has been killed off this year, and the rest is in mortal danger. There have been 3 mass bleaching events recorded on the reef, and all of them have happened since 1998. But this last episode, this year was unprecedented. It was an unprecedented die-off. It's the worst scientists have ever seen. How many dead canaries does this equate to? I recently got back from Hawaii, and it's happening there too. Wide swaths of coral colonies have died off, and the reach of this devastation is global. Primary reason? Warming ocean temperatures, dominant driver, the burning of fossil fuels. ExxonMobil's senior scientist, James Black, way back 40 years ago, he knew it too, and he said the most likely manner in which mankind is influencing the global climate is through carbon dioxide released from the burning of fossil fuels. All of us here, we know what we have to do. We have to reduce our dependence on all fossil fuels and make the move to renewables happen fast. We all know this. You here have done something so important, something that really counts, when you voted unanimously last year for a full ban on any fossil fuel infrastructure expansion. You were clear, you were unequivocal, you were resolute. Now is no time for half measures, watered down inserted clauses, backpedaling, concessions to strong arming forces. Now is the time to show others what inspired leadership looks like. Bold action is contagious. Let's chart a course for other cities to follow. You all make me so proud to be from Portland, and I just want to leave you with one question. When I do my seismic upgrades on my apartment building, will I be allowed through a code or zoning change to build 10 or 20% or 30% more rentable space to recoup my seismic upgrade costs? Of course not. But I still should do the right thing, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Next 3 are Dr. Theodora Songas, Julie Chapman, and Mary Vogel, and they'll be followed by Rose Christopherson, MD, PhD, Regna Merritt, and Anna Turner. That's 28, 29, and 30.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Theodora Songas. I'm a member of the Environmental Health Working Group of Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility and a member of the Multnomah County Local Emergency Planning Committee. The fossil fuel terminal zoning code changes recommended by the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission are well thought out. I commend their restriction of aggregation of small fossil fuel terminals and their rejection of a request by Northwest Natural to exempt its facilities. But the recommended code changes still raise concerns about public safety and could pose a threat to our community and neighborhoods. You've been reminded of the fire that resulted from a collision of an oil tanker truck with an oil train. Unfortunately, the truck driver was killed. Fortunately, the train cars burned but did not explode. It was a very close call for nearby industries, workers, and residents in Northwest Portland. In Mosier, the derailed train cars burned for days and disabled much of the town's water infrastructure, exposing residents and visitors to noxious smoke, as well as causing major disruption in the life of the town. Accidents do happen. Let's not increase the likelihood of an oil fire. We need to truly actively oppose expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. This means actively discouraging increases in demand for fossil fuel unit trains in Portland. A 10% across the board increase in terminal capacity for the 10 large oil facilities listed by PSC would result in additional storage of 39 million gallons of oil, a volume equivalent to roughly 13 unit trains of explosive Bakken crude oil. We must find ways to require seismic and safety upgrades without increasing capacity, or we defeat the purpose of Council Resolutions 37168 and 37164 and the Climate Action Plan. Let's truly take the lead in combating climate disruption. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Julie Chapman with the League of Women Voters of Portland. Any increase in fossil fuel infrastructure is not consistent with the League of Women Voters' natural resources and climate change positions. Having followed the process of code development, I've observed that the recommendations have ranged from unlimited expansion to no increase in capacity in the existing terminals. Last month, 3 of the 7 Planning and Sustainability Commissioners voted not to allow an increase. The petroleum industry has not exactly rushed to upgrade their tanks, even with no size restrictions. Allowing a 10% increase in capacity for existing terminals is arbitrary. Any increase in terminal capacity is not compatible with state climate goals, nor with Portland's Climate Action Plan. These goals do not state the exception unless we have an increase in regional population. In fact, regional population increases are assumed in the calculations. The goals are a reflection of the important task before us to leave behind the business as usual paradigm and to adopt clean energy policy. The good news is that the costs for developing alternative energy resources are coming down all the time. We live in a state without a petroleum extraction industry and with a wealth of water, sun, and wind. If any region in the world is well suited to shift onto renewable energy, it's Portland and Oregon. We urge you to exercise foresight and to stick to the goals you've adopted in the Resolution 37168. If cities lead, we'd like to be headed in the right direction.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you again today. I'm Mary Vogel. As you know, I'm a planning consultant who usually focuses on central city planning, but today I want to support the general direction of these zoning amendments. I do want to question, however, the need to allow the 10% expansion of tanks in the proposal. I know that our planning director, Susan Anderson, knows that urban design and urban form are critical to reducing demand. But Susan didn't mention the residential infill project that we heard yesterday that will allow more people to live in walkable neighborhoods as well as make more neighborhoods walkable. By the way, folks, you can still testify on that or send testimony until November 16th. She didn't mention your upcoming hearing on parking code reform, which was in fact mentioned by Commissioner Novick, that will also reduce the demand for fossil fuels. And she didn't mention the central city 2035 plan that I'm still hoping will make our central city streets more walkable and bikeable. And there are so many other policies, either recently passed or under consideration, that will lead to a decrease in demand. So as excellent as the report from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is, I certainly learned a lot from it. It does not make a good case for the need for the 10% capacity increase. I want to support what so many others before me have said and ask you to take the allowance for the 10% expansion out. I also want to support the invitations from Commissioner Fritz and Novick to all of us to come to both the legislative hearings, if you could repeat the date, perhaps, Amanda, and the parking reform hearings as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. You know, I want to make a suggestion in terms of process. I know we have more people to hear, but I'd like to call the staff back up for a bit of a work session on just some of the questions that have been raised, because you and others have raised this 10% issue, and we actually also heard from the industry about that. So if that would suit the council, I know we're going to lose a quorum at 5. And we also have some demonstrations downtown that has the police bureau urging people to make travel plans a little differently. So if we can, I'd like to take a little bit of a pause in testimony and just bear down a little bit on a couple of the issues that we've heard. So I think this is certainly my perspective. I think it's the perspective of this council. I know it is. And I really know it is when it comes to you as professionals. There's no one here who's beholden to the fossil fuel industry. My only interest in any mitigating factors in our turning policy into code is to make it work as a practical matter, to avoid getting overturned by some other government. Those are probably the only reasons. So if the 10% threshold, which we intended for reasons of encouraging seismic upgrades, apparently isn't going to do that, what's the case for it?
Let me toss out something and let you guys add. I think you can recommend 0%, but there is an issue around blending that's very real in terms of a consideration, in terms of wanting to be able to have tanks to be able to do that, and whether you be able to monitor that is unlikely. I think adding on an amendment that directs my fellow bureau directors at BDS, PBEM, and Fire to pursue, new code so that you can actually require seismic upgrade is, from my perspective, absolutely something we need to do and get moving on. The sooner we do it, it's going to take years, though. So whether or not you want to go to 0 now, eventually you want to go to 0. And if you want to do that after the new code is finally through the state and we get to adopt it, or if you want to do it now.
Why does it take years to get a change at the state?
I'm not going to say that it absolutely will, but in general, the building code changes follow practice, and it's in the past been like a 2 or 3 year process to get a major change in the building code. So you can get Paul Scarlett in here to talk more about that, but it's not an overnight thing. But
well, I would imagine a lot of building code things are kind of inside of baseball, or there's committees that deal with that. This is obviously a bigger public purpose. So surely if the legislature was to direct it, that could happen faster, right?
So, yeah, I'm really struggling with, I need some, not that you're arguing for it. You tried to craft good policy here, and you also have a history of crafting visionary policy. So, again, it's not like Portland to pull its punches on these issues. But if the 10% threshold, and we just heard from Kinder Morgan, isn't going to incent them to make the change, and if the rate of change from old dangerous tanks to new seismically resilient ones is glacial, it's going to take us 300 years at the current rate to have it all taken care of. So in other words, we're not solving the problem or even ameliorating the concern in the industry. I'm starting to wonder if there's any real upside to the 10% threshold.
Maybe Michael can talk about blending and whether that's a real issue.
Okay, that I probably need to hear a little bit about.
Yeah, so I think blending is the consideration. So the state Clean Fuels program first came into effect January of this year. So it's coming up on being in place for 1 year. It ratchets up the percent of low carbon fuels that need to be blended in.
Right.
So the recent new tanks that we've seen have been specifically for blending. I think it's believable that the current infrastructure will need some additional tanks in order to do that blending as the clean fuels.
But couldn't we
requirement steps up.
specifically address that issue? In other words, if there's any exception or carve out here, couldn't it be if it's only for that purpose as opposed to some sort of general wiggle room?
I think we could try to define it that way.
But presumably, any new blending process would have to involve new construction. So if the companies are feeling like, well, being told that they've got to move to that, they're going to be building new tanks anyway, right? So why would they need a bigger tank than currently?
I think that might be a good question for the terminal operators.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is one that, I know we've talked about it before, but based on what we've heard from the community and from the industry, I think it needs work in that sense, in that we want to make sure we're really in concert with the state. We have a state clean fuels policy that I think we all agree is going in the right direction, saying use more and more and more clean fuels. We certainly want the infrastructure of providing those clean fuels to be provided, granted the fact that we're going to be using less and less fossil fuel overall, right? So those are all the scenarios that I believe we agree with state government on. And then we got to get these old dangerous tanks replaced with new ones. It sounds like, frankly, the only way to get to that is a mandate. I'm fine with that. And it sounds like, again, it's not going to happen with incentives. A few people have built new tanks, but again, we just heard that the 10% threshold isn't going to change their corporate decision-making about that. So, I'm really, frankly, struggling with what we're getting for the 10% allowance, really given the testimony that we heard from the industry. It's like, okay, it isn't going to work, then we're not doing anyone any favors here. Not that we were trying to, but
And also, Matt, just thinking through the politics of it, sometimes, for instance, on sick leave, when Portland has a very strong ordinance, the legislature sometimes comes back and weakens it a bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know why we wouldn't go for the strong ordinance in the first place.
Well, right, and again, as I said earlier, the only reasons I would pull my punches on this issue politically would be that if we had a significant fear that the legislature would overrule our ability to do what we're doing. That has happened. It has not happened lately. The legislature's been going in the right direction lately. They set us free from a prohibition on inclusionary housing, for example, rather than tying us down with new ones. For the legislature to step in, sorry if I think out loud here a little bit, but for the legislature to step in on local zoning would be a pretty big overreach. But I guess they've done that before too.
Because they're housing, the ban was all about.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we've been pretty consistent in not legislating exclusively against the fear that someone is going to pull the rug out from under us, even though they have that right, but they then have to make that case. I think as I listened to this discussion, Susan, with the mayor and the incentive plan, but I guess, while I appreciate that Kinder Morgan came in and staked a position, I guess I don't have enough information about who else might actually take advantage of the incentive and what is, as the mayor said, the benefit. If we can't mandate it and we don't control the timeline for that process, although I'd like to see it, the same way that we've moved towards green roofs as being part of a mandate and not just an incentive. And if we're not sure whether the incentive is going to work, i.e. people may not take advantage of it, well, a dormant incentive doesn't have much of a negative impact. But if there is someone who might use the incentive to create what we consider a public good, which is bringing something up to seismic standards that we don't have another tool to do, I guess I'd like to know beyond just Kinder Morgan, who might take advantage of that and why, and then before we just say that we're going to take this out, address the mayor's question about can it be tailored so that it's actually adapted to real-world situations where we get a clear public benefit and not just be an invitation to be used willy-nilly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, you know, in other issues like this, often we've done sort of a do this until, so we could say we will set up a 10%, you know, this incentive until the legislation gets passed, at which time it's going to be regulatory, and obviously it ends at the time. It
And I would
just
think-
covers
That would be a disincentive, though, to the industry to not oppose the legislation. If they get the 10% now.
Can I just continue this line? Because again, I don't want to extrapolate off of one person's testimony about what Kinder Morgan will or will not do.
Right.
And that Commissioner Novick is not here, but he would be leading the discussion about moving towards upgrading seismic standards. And at least at this point, we don't know whether the legislature will or not take this up in a timely manner. And given the investment we're about to make in Superfund and some early action, we got to get a handle on this, because everything we do in the river could be undone if there's a seismic event and we have failure around these tanks. So for me to make this decision, I'd have to have a better sense about who is impacted, who might take advantage of it, what is the public benefit, because right now I feel like we're speculating. And then, yes, of course, it would have to be tailored so that it either sunset or there was some clear oversight about how it was used, and then we'd have some follow-up decision-making. But I think the mayor hit the nail on the head. I just don't feel like I have enough information to evaluate whether it would be an incentive that someone would take advantage of for the public benefit.
I mean, one of the things, and then Michael, take over, is we aren't setting this up right now. They have that incentive right now.
That's what I was just going to say.
They can do it right now, and we're getting one a year, maybe. And so whether or not, you know, there's no limit, they can go 30% over at this point, and it's not an incentive to do it now. So I kind of believe what
Not
the
really an
mayor was
incentive.
suggesting.
Yeah, I think
Let's take it out.
making it clear, taking it out.
You're kind of believing the mayor should withdraw his amendment?
No.
No, I don't have that.
What I'm saying is that
That amendment didn't, it's already in the base proposal from the Planning and Sustainability Commission, 10%.
at 10%, but if we're following, we put that in there because the Planning and Sustainability Commission felt like they thought that an incentive would help
Yeah.
to move the market.
I appreciate
At the same time, there were others on the commission making the case, well, they have that right now, and it doesn't cause action.
They have what right now?
They can
As much
grow
as
it.
they want.
They
Expand.
They can expand today more
In an
than 10%.
industrial zone today, you can just go build a tank, right?
can make
There's
as
no
big as you
limits at
want.
all.
You're
So-
saying they're playing Russian roulette.
Well, no,
I mean, we're not making the investment to make them seismically resilient because they're not required to, and because you just.
Well, there's another issue too, sorry, which is maybe they don't see the market expanding.
Right.
Right.
So as we've drawn
Demand.
over and over and said, demand is flat and or falling, and if we are going to reach our 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, it's only going to be falling. So what would be the private financial incentive for them to invest in this? Forget our rules at all.
In a land use, if we were doing the comp plan right now, you'd hand us a little one-pager that had a bunch of options and a box we could check. So because it's getting late, we've been in lots of hearings lately, could you just walk us through what you think are the options before council on this point?
Leave it in as 10%, that's one.
Yeah, you leave it as
Leave it as
10%.
is. Lower.
You could go to 0. You could go to something in between. You should also probably have an amendment that says, and maybe you've already put this together, about having BDS and PBEM and fire,
Just the
Put
the
together-
Fourth Amendment that you have.
you know, the new code. So I think that's it.
So I will say that.
Couldn't you also go up?
Above 10%?
Yeah, you could say,
You could say,
give
if
them 30%.
10% isn't sufficient, maybe a 50% incentive is.
Yeah.
And what's the trade-off?
Well, then we don't have really a policy of limiting
I'd rather have a
fossil fuels,
seismically
do we?
safe tank or a slightly larger tank. I don't know.
I will say,
Probably
the mayor's Fourth Amendment that provides additional direction has us reporting back to you in 3 years to see what's going on, what the fuel demand trends are, what the tank replacement has been. So that's an opportunity and a check step at that point to review what are the dynamics. I think in addition, the 10% is in there not only for an incentive for seismic upgrades, but the uncertainty around this fuel blending for the clean fuel standards that is in year one, and is going to ratchet up over the next 10 years. We don't know what the needs are going to be for a blended tank. We have said it's okay to have a tank of non-fossil fuel, of ethanol, that you need to blend. But that part of that additional expansion capacity is for that fuel blending when you take the ethanol and the petroleum and mix it together, which happens on this end of the pipe, not up in the Puget Sound area.
Yeah, so let me make a suggestion, and that is, again, we don't always do this to go into work session during a hearing, but there's been a lot of consistency about the testimony, and we're gonna lose a quorum in half an hour. Let me restate what I said earlier. Actually, I think there are 3 reasons that I would in any way weaken what we put in policy into code. One would be practicality. It's got to actually work in the present day. Present day is how we live now, but we're moving towards a lower carbon future. That's our stated commitment as a city. That's where we're headed. So it's got to actually work tomorrow morning. Thus, for example, the asphalt amendment, because oil locked up in pavement is not a problem for the climate, as at least nowhere near as much of one as oil being burned. So, and we do still need pavement. So I'm okay with that one. That's being practical. Second, I want to be political in the sense that I do not want to set the city of Portland up to be overturned in court or at the legislature. So that's a real politic reason to be calibrated in what we do. And the third would be that we're not creating a replicable model, because I believe, as a lot of people have said here, that we're going to create a precedent and a template for other cities to follow. And I want them to be able to pick up this ordinance and cross out Portland and put in Eugene or Prineville or anywhere else. And so that's a concern. It seems to me the 10% threshold isn't pivotal to those questions. Doesn't sound like it's needed in the practical world, and that but the blending thing might be. So I'm going to ask that you prepare an amendment that removes the 10% and adds a blending provision. Bring that back to us. We're not going to do that on horseback here today, but bring that back to us as an option, because if there's a way to do that, I think there might be an interest on the council in going that direction. And I think Commissioner Fish's request is good as well, which is, in the next week or so before we return to this discussion, it would be good to check that with the industry. We're not going to agree with the industry on this. We already know that, but how would a blending provision work? You get to build a new tank. If you're doing it to follow the state's clean fuel guidelines, tell us how that would work. It seems to me that's a set of conversations that you ought to have with them as an industry, and then we use to make adjustments to this code proposal. Is that helpful to where you're?
And I think we should also, of course, check in with government relations and with our partners in the leaders in the legislature, both of whom are Portland politicians, so that's great. Could you just explain a bit about the 2,000 versus 5,000? I got kind of...
Million.
No, the 200, is it?
Million. The 2 million gallons versus the 5 million gallons?
No, there's something else in there.
Sorry.
Confused about.
Is this in the amendment or in the code?
It was in the code, and people. So it was. No, I can't find it.
Mayor, while we're looking for that, I think we should just let the folks here know that because of the demonstrations that are planned around this building, we've been advised to give our staffs the opportunity to leave early because they may not be able to get their cars. There may be a disruption of the MAX or bus lines or other things. And that's not to be alarmist. That's just to tell people that if they are required to pick up a child at school, get to a medical appointment, get home at a certain time, it may be that the transportation system is impacted around this building. So I would just say, while we're going to continue this hearing, if someone has that concern, they should just make their own judgment.
In our process check here, we're going to continue this hearing till 5, and then we're going to continue the hearing, that is, because we do have people working on amendments, and we may not, and we certainly probably won't get to everyone who wants to speak today, so we'll do our best.
So, and you're right, it was the 2 million there's a definition of capacity exceeding 2 million gallons. So could you explain, it used to be 5 million gallons, and what is that?
The Planning Commission reduced that, right?
Yes. Yeah, so we had, originally, when we started into this process, we were looking at the large Pembina-type facilities, which are 30, 40 million gallons. And through this process and through the discussion process and through the Planning Commission, we got down, before the Planning Commission, it was a 5 million gallon. That covers pretty much all of the major distributors in the Portland Harbor today. There was concern that there would be both some small operators underneath there that might grow up, the growing from 1 million gallons to 4 million gallons, and what that would represent as a increase in fossil fuel infrastructure. And so the Planning Commission recommended, and before you, is to move that threshold down to 2 million gallons. 2 million gallons is roughly the equivalent of one oil train, one unit train carrying crude oil.
And what's about the 2 million? Because we heard testimony saying that we should get rid of that, and I don't quite understand that bit.
I think it has to do with how small do you get, and when you pull in the smaller operators, does that become a burden on essentially local distributors, such as propane companies that bring in rail cars and then distribute even the small bottles of propane around? And do we want to regulate all of those people that may have 100,000 gallons of capacity?
So it is a threshold, it's a floor.
It's the floor.
It's what's defining a bulk facility.
Who and above do we capture?
And so the testimony that we heard was that we should make it even lower.
Right.
And the reason why is not, okay, thank you, I understand that.
So I'm not sure if I'm ready to, I haven't heard anything yet that would cause me to move it up or down. Certainly wouldn't want to move it up. But one of the things that ought to be in that follow-up plan is, again, what's our intention here? No more bulk fossil fuel terminals in Portland. So we think we know what bulk looks like. The Planning Commission says that's 2 million gallons.
Right.
That may not be right. In other words, where we would really want to draw the line. It may be smaller than that, but that's something we might not figure out in the first version of the ordinance. So I'm less prepared to try to tinker with that than I am with the 10% provision, which apparently isn't, at least gives people the appearance that we're watering down the ordinance, but might not do any good. And that seems to me the worst of both possible worlds.
From the 2 million to weekend in the next week, put together what kinds of companies, real examples of companies in the Portland area that would be affected by that. So the propane companies and some of the smaller firms.
Okay. Any other requests for them before we'll continue the hearing till 5, and then we're going to unfortunately have to carry it over for those of you who didn't get to speak today, but obviously also to give the staff the chance to come back with some more.
I would like to see some clarifying language that was suggested by the Working Waterfront Coalition to define what is covered by the 10%, if we even stick with the 10%, that it applies to tanks only and not to piping and pumps and things like that.
Great. Thank you very much. Other questions for staff?
It's very helpful, thank you.
All right, then let's return to the list, please, and we'll keep going as long as we can.
Okay, the next three were 28, 29, and 30. Rose Christopherson, Regna Merritt, and Anna Turner. And they'll be followed by 31, 32, 33, Patricia Bellamy, Diane Wynn, and Andy Harris.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Whoever would like to go first, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Whoever's ready.
Okay. Hi. Thanks a lot for all the good work you guys are doing. I'm Rose Christopherson, and I am going to testify as a representative of the Care of Creation Ministry of Augustana Lutheran Church. God gave us an incredible rainbow Saturday morning. I don't know if you guys saw it, but the thing that I noticed was that the red is on the outside, the long wavelength, and then it goes yellow, orange, etc., and the violet is on the inside, the short wavelength. And what actually falls on the earth, of course, is, we call it light because we see it, but it's electromagnetic radiation, which continues into the invisible range on both sides. Heat is the side that goes beyond red. It's a lower wavelength, and that's infrared. And when we see something, say a red scarf, what's happening is the red is reflecting and that's why you're seeing it. And all the other wavelengths are absorbed. When you see something like a lump of coal, you do see it, so something's being reflected, but for the most part, it's being absorbed, it's black. And when you burn that coal and you get carbon dioxide and it goes up into the atmosphere, now it gathers warmth because the infrared light that hits the earth and comes back out into the atmosphere is captured by that carbon dioxide. And so that's where the warming comes from. And the fact that it's above us is why they call it a greenhouse gas. So as we burn the fossil fuels, carbon dioxide is released, and it warms the earth. And so when you see a rainbow again, I think you'll notice the red on the outside, and you'll remember the carbon dioxide absorbing the heat from the longer wavelength. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. That was a teachable moment.
You know, if a doctor can explain it and a city council can understand it, it's actually simple physics.
Call that progress. Thank you.
It's really simple.
Thank you very much. Regna, would you like to go next?
Thank you, Mayor Hales and Commissioners. Today I'm testifying on behalf of Power Pass Coal Coalition, which is a huge alliance of health, environmental, business, clean energy, faith, and community groups working to stop coal exports off the West Coast. We deeply support Resolution 37681 and truly want to see full implementation of those protections. This City Council has been well ahead of the curve on climate, fossil fuels, coal, and oil. You have been awesome. Yet after Tuesday's election, this is a new world. President-elect Trump is as volatile as Bakken oil. Big oil and big coal have a big vision and very detailed plans for exporting fossil fuels from our West Coast ports. They are emboldened now and are becoming more empowered with each passing day. While we'd hope there'd be an opportunity to improve protections, say for oil by rail at a federal level, it's more obvious today than ever before that our local and state leadership must protect and sustain us over the next many years. Bold local actions through zoning amendments must be taken to safeguard our lives, health and safety, and they must be taken to protect our climate. We rely on you. So please modify this proposal to prohibit all expansion of existing fossil fuel terminals, encourage seismic upgrades through state building codes without expansion of capacity, eliminate the threshold for prohibiting new fossil fuel terminals, and also explicitly prohibit bait and switch maneuvers that allow 100% fossil fuels to be stored in tanks that were permitted for clean fuels. This was done in Claskenai by Global Partners. Also, please maintain that part of this proposal that does not exempt natural gas and its methane from this code. We've got to stay ahead of the game in this new world. This is where the rubber hits the road, and we can protect our own backyards. We can protect those who are most vulnerable and protect the climate that sustains all of Earth's inhabitants. So we thank you, and future generations will thank you for taking the right action on this.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Dr. Ann Turner, and I'm representing Oregon's Physicians for Social Responsibility. I've spent my entire career working with underserved communities, first at Multnomah County Health Department, and for the last 20 years at Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center, both as a clinician and as medical director. And we all deeply appreciate your leadership on climate, coal trains, oil trains, and the recent fossil fuel resolution. But today I'm here to ask that you give strong consideration to the issue of environmental justice as you review the proposed zoning amendments before you. It's important that we fully understand the broad and negative impacts that any increase in fossil fuel capacity in Portland may bring to low-income communities and communities of color. Air quality will be degraded by diesel emissions. Emergency response times will be delayed. And those loud, startling train horns blowing 24/7 will disrupt sleep, study, and work for those living in those neighborhoods. Serious health impacts from increased hospitalizations for asthma, heart attacks, and cancer may be experienced by those in the neighborhoods as well, exposed to that environmental pollution. So in order to meet the standards of equity and environmental justice and to protect public health for our most vulnerable, please do not permit a 10% expansion in the new fossil fuel terminals, and find a comprehensive seismic solution now rather than later, and permit no new fossil fuel terminals of any size. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
The next three are Patricia Bellamy, Diane Nguyen, and Andy Harris, 31, 32, 33, and they'll be followed by Myrta Akhter, Ryan Rittenhouse, and Maya Jared, 34, 35, 36.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Hi.
I don't remember who was first, so go ahead, please.
I thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Hales and council members. My name is Patricia Bellamy. Thank you for the opportunity to offer support for your fully restricting development and expansion of any and all bulk fossil fuel terminals and eliminating the 10% increase in expansion, and to give you a nurse's perspective. I've been a Portland resident for over 30 years and a critical care nurse for over 40. I'm a current member of the American Nurses Association, ANA, which serves over 3,600,000 nurses, and Oregon Nurses Association, ONA, which represents over 10,000 Oregon RNs. ONA has unanimously passed a statewide resolution in support of Oregon's position of no to coal exports. In a letter to Governor Kate Brown, ONA wrote, and I quote, "ONA is continuing to work opposing projects that would increase coal transportation in Oregon. As a frontline member of our healthcare system, nurses are concerned about the health and environmental impacts caused by coal." End of quote. Nurses are also acutely aware of the dangers of climate disruption. ANA's national-wide resolution reads, "Resolved that the American Nurses Association recognizes and publicly acknowledges that the challenges we face as a result of global climate change are unprecedented in human history. It is critical that nurses speak out in a united voice and advocate for changes on both individual and policy levels, period. Climate disruption is real and impacts are being felt. The health and safety hazards from coal, oil, natural gas, or methanol are far too many to list in this brief testimony. The science is clear. Thank you for your groundbreaking work."
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Nguyen. I'm a retired public health nurse and worked over 25 years conducting injury prevention research. I was here a year ago when you passed the fossil fuel resolution. What a proud moment it was. Our city leaders had taken a historic and bold step in addressing climate disruption. Today, as you consider the zoning amendments, I urge you to support the modifications recommended by the Power Pass Coal. With my background in public health, I am concerned about explosions and fires that can cause traumatic injuries and death, and the release of toxins into the air. An obvious fire risk is the transport of fossil fuels. In the past couple of years, at least 10 oil trains have experienced catastrophic derailments and explosions in North America. We all know about the derailment in Canada that demolished a city and killed 47 people. One way to reduce these risks is to reduce the need for fossil fuel transport. Back to the 10%, even a 10% increase in the capacity of large fossil fuel terminals will increase in the number of trains. Oil and other fossil fuel storage tanks are also at risk for fires and explosions. For example, a human error fire in Mississippi in 2006 killed 3 workers after fire traveled from one oil storage tank to another. Less than 1 year ago today, the potential for a fossil fuel tank fire hit too close to home. A tractor trailer carrying fuel struck several train cars near the St. John's Bridge and burst into flames. This occurred approximately 400 feet from the LNG tank. Finally, like others, I cannot conclude without mentioning the election results. We cannot expect the federal government to do anything to address climate disruption and fossil fuels. It will be up to cities and states. I again ask you to take a very bold stand and pass a strong, aggressive fossil fuel policy. Your leadership will serve as a beacon of hope to the rest of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Afternoon, Mayor Hales and Commissioners. I'm Andy Harris. I'm a resident of the Overlook neighborhood of North Portland. My home is above the Union Pacific Freight Yard within the half-mile blast and evacuation zone for oil train derailments. I work at OHSU, but I'm speaking here on behalf of Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. Portland does need to take bold and prudent action. Building additional fossil fuel terminal capacity, whether it's 10% or otherwise, in a seismically active area is not prudent. Allowing more fossil fuel trains, coal, oil, and gas to pass through Portland is not prudent. Fossil fuels are inherently unsafe, whether being transported, transferred, stored, or shipped. From the Moser experience in June, we know firsthand about the fires and explosions of the flammable Bakken oil. Portland has made a commitment to reduce our impact on global climate change or climate disruption and to transition to renewable energy. To weaken the Council's fossil fuel resolution by allowing additional fossil fuel capacity of 10% and/or adding new exemptions is unwise and dangerous. A case in point is natural gas or methane that is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Natural gas is extracted from the ground, as you know, by fracking, a method that increases and causes vast quantities of methane to be released into the atmosphere. Thus far, the transition from coal and oil energy to natural gas has been a wash as far as its impact on climate change. I'm glad that an exemption for natural gas has not been present in the current proposal, and I would urge you not to create one. So just to conclude, as a physician and as a grandfather, I would urge the Council to take bold and effective action by putting the health and safety of Portlanders first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's take 3 more people, and then we'll do a process check about how we're going to continue on. So.
Next 3 are Myrna Actor, Ryan Rittenhouse, and Maya Jared. That's 35, 36, and 34, 35, 36.
Okay, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mukta Akhtar, and I'm a social and climate activist from Bangladesh. Currently, I'm here working with 350 PDX as an international fellow to Solidarity on Climate Justice issue. Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. The developed countries like US are producing the largest amount of greenhouse gases, but contributing countries like Bangladesh, who are contributing almost no greenhouse gases, are the ones paying a lot. Bangladesh is mainly a low elevation country, and the combination of sea level rise and increasingly powerful storms is already contaminating our fresh water with salinity. The effects are dramatic and devastating. Extreme weather events are having major impacts on agriculture, food security, and economic performance of Bangladesh. The scenario is almost the same for the entire South Asia. According to the latest NOAA data, we can expect a 1 meter sea level rise by 2035. This means 35% of Bangladesh's coastal area will submerge under seawater, and 15 to 20 million people is going to turn into climate refugees. It's a huge challenge for our government now, how we resettle them. The effects have already started in your country. For instance, the catastrophic flood in Texas and Louisiana last year, and the coastal erosion in Florida. Please think, what is the race of development when it becomes risk for lives and livelihood? Due to your contribution to greenhouse gases, Our future and the next generation is in great risk. Climate change is not an isolated issue. It is a global problem, and to fight against it needs collaborative approach. The policy you are working towards, no new fossil fuel infrastructures, is a good start. Still, much more needs to be done to secure our mother globe from the devastating climate calamities. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
No? All right, I'll go. My name is Ryan Rittenhouse. I work for Friends of the Columbia Gorge. As you can guess, we're very much concerned with any increase in fossil fuel transportation through the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. As you heard from the mayor of Mosier earlier, there was the disaster earlier this summer where an oil train derailed. As far as oil train disasters go, that was about as good as you could hope for. As she said, the train wasn't moving very fast and the wind wasn't blowing at all, which is very rare for the gorge, especially that time of year. If we have another oil train disaster in the gorge, it will likely be much, much worse than what happened in Mosier. And what happened in Mosier was pretty bad. There's still ground contamination, there's still water contamination from what happened out there. It takes a long time. This is not something that's being exaggerated. And any increase in fossil fuel infrastructure, fossil fuel storage, even this 10% increase, and maybe even that limit on 200 million gallons is too much, because it will mean more oil trains through the gorge, and it will mean that the likelihood of another disaster happening in the gorge goes up. So the other thing about the 10% is we keep talking about that as in terms of calling it an incentive, and I don't know if that's really quite the right word, because an incentive is something that gives them a reason to do something for its own sake. But this, quote, incentive, which feels to me more like a loophole or a handout, more is reliant upon the market of the oil industry for them to make the upgrades themselves. If we are going to do an incentive, let's come up with an incentive that actually encourages them to make the seismic upgrades for its own sake, and that reinforces the spirit of the resolution and the ordinance, which is reducing fossil fuel use and reducing fossil fuel storage capacity in the city. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Dear Commissioners and Mayor Hales, my name is Maya Jared, and I'm staff with 350 PDX. Frankly, I am thrilled to be addressing a governing body that is ready to take action on climate change. At this moment, we cannot look to federal legislators to speed the inevitable transition from fossil fuels to renewable and safe energy. And so I am that much more appreciative right now of the way Portland has taken the bold and inevitable step to facilitate this transition and ban new bulk fossil fuel terminals. I want to talk about the potential for flatline demand and decrease of fuels in Oregon. The Energy Information Administration predicts for Oregon only a 0.7% increase in total crude oil and least condensate consumption by the year 2040, though that growth is predicted after year 2030. And that's with low incentives for industrial efficiency and high oil prices. So the biggest possible growth for those fuel needs in Oregon predicted by the EIA. In other words, the most generous models for fuel expansion. Other model scenarios predict a decline of 0.4% on the same timeline. Again, these increases are predicted after 2030. Given the current status of changes to the climate, I pose to you the question of whether fuel increases will be called for after 2030. You may not be able to legally demand upgrades under current law for seismic safety. We in this room will demand upgrades of companies for seismic safety. We have made it politically possible for you as our governing body to pass very strong climate action, and I can assure you that the people in this room and watching you from all over Portland will demand the corporations in this city to make seismic upgrades and safety for our people of Portland. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. So again, let's take a process check here. We appreciate you who've testified. And again, we know we're not going to be able to hear everyone today, but.
Could I just ask, I'm very much appreciative of our guests from Bangladesh. Did you have other people who've come a long way to testify today?
I think not. She's
Okay.
here.
I believe there might be someone here from Haiti.
That's what I was wondering.
I'm not sure he wants to testify.
He wants to
Okay.
testify.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that, if you come all that way. it'd be-
Yes, thank you. That's very important. Thank you very much. So it's our normal practice when we have more people than time to continue a hearing, and we may want to do that. We also, I know we're going to want to take up discussion of amendments at our next meeting. So what's our window of availability here in terms of upcoming council meetings?
Mayor, the good thing is we have so little on our plate.
Yeah, there's nothing else going on, yeah.
Well, I don't have a full council until December 7th, when everybody's back. And
Sorry, hang on a second. So you're saying, well, what about next week? I'm sorry.
Well, it's already on the regular agenda for the 16th, but Commissioner Fish is gone next week, next Wednesday.
How about the 8th?
We may not take final action on the next week because we'll be working on amendments and hearing testimony. So we should go ahead and do that, right? But then the question is, when do we have a third window for a
December
vote?
8th, like Carla?
Oh, no, that's inclusionary zoning for 4 hours.
But if it's just the vote.
But if it's just a vote.
Just a vote.
Yeah.
We're all going to be celebrating Governor Barbara Roberts' 80th birthday that day, so we got to make sure that we have a little window.
That's not just the vote, it's the hearing on the 8th.
No, we're just.
No, we're saying, we're going to continue. Yeah,
okay.
I want to continue this hearing to next week because it's on the calendar for next week anyway. Susan, you might help us out here if you've got any process suggestions. So bear with us, folks, because we want to be able to give you notice about what's next. But this hearing is this issue is back on the council calendar next week, right, Zach?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's the first item on the regular agenda right now.
So we will discuss amendments, the ones that are in front of us, and maybe some others, because we've asked staff to prepare some potential additional amendments. We'll take action on the amendments at the beginning of the session, take testimony, see if we got it right, and adopt the amendments. And then we'll set a date for the final vote. So the final vote could be, not going to be the 23rd of November, right? Because we don't have
Commissioner
five of
Novick's
us here.
gone, right.
Okay.
So could we do it on the 8th, just before inclusionary zoning?
We could do it then, right? All five of us here on the 8th?
It's just the vote.
Everybody's here on the 7th if it's just a vote.
The 7th, but the 7th doesn't work for me, but we could do it just before the inclusionary housing on the 8th?
That's Commissioner Saltzman's item, if that's okay with him.
We're not cutting into his time, we're just casting a vote.
If it's only the vote. If
Okay.
it's any additional testimony, then I would object.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. So we'll continue this hearing next week, right? At what time?
It'll be the 16th, roughly 10:45.
Okay, so if you've signed up to speak today and didn't get a chance, and you want to speak next week, you'll be first. What we'll do next week is we will have a council discussion on amendments, take action on amendments, and then let you testify and tell us if we got it right or not. And then the final action on the ordinance itself is on the 8th. That's how it works, that we don't do amendments and final votes on the same day when we're making legislation. Because the zoning code is around for a really long time, which is the whole idea here. So again, I want to thank you all for excellent testimony. Stay in touch with Zach Lanoski in my office for discussions about these issues. Come back next week if you are able. If you can't come back next week and still want to let us know your thoughts on this matter, obviously email each of our offices as you have been doing already. But I really want to thank this community and the excellent testimony we got today. We have a chance here in Portland to make a difference, and you are why. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned until next week. Thank you.